Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the War Report of 2025. I'd like to wish you all a Happy New Year, and for those of you who celebrated Christmas yesterday, the 7th, Merry Christmas. I'm holding my end of the bargain there. I did not forget. And we're glad to be back with a year in review, year looking forward, and a show that's really going to be all over the place because of so much that has happened, plus the retrospective. So, who better to assist in such an endeavor than our good
hmm
friend Geo? He's back.
Ahoy, hoy.
Woo! as I was saying off air, I've known Geo now for almost 5 years,
Yeah.
and since this is such a momentous occasion, because literally I met him in February of 2020, just before like all the COOF restrictions and everything went into place, and we met in a restaurant where I blackpilled him. Because I literally have two modes: sleep, black pill.
So true.
I'm joking. I'm joking. Anyways, I've always loved this portrait. I don't take very many good portraits, but I do love this one, and I'm happy to say that Geo's allowed me to share it because I think it shows just how thoughtful and even whimsical Geo is.
Aw.
Yeah, absolutely. I,
You
I
can see
was
the
I was
black
so
pills descending upon him.
I was very impressed. I was very impressed. And I remember another time we met up and your dad shows up and you could, he's an old world man, right? He thinks like a lot of this is, he's like my dad,
Yeah.
what's the point of all of this? And I don't know, he's talking to me about something and I go, your son is brilliant. He just stopped. anyways, Constantine, if you could please show the photo.
Oh,
I just
I've been
love this
showing it
one.
for the past
Oh, okay,
couple minutes
great,
There
here,
you
great,
so don't
go.
great.
worry. Way ahead of you.
Okay, yeah,
He starts, I
yeah.
think my old man started reminiscing about, he goes, I knew a guy from Macedonia. Because, like, there was quite a bit of Eastern Europeans that arrived here in the Naga region.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There
Yeah.
were,
A
there
lot of
were.
Serbians. Yeah.
Yeah, half my family is down there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They own all the strip clubs, the Serbians, like the
Oh, do they?
Sundowners.
I
Yeah.
was, I was just gonna say because there was no Macedonian church. My aunt always took her kids, especially for Easter and Christmas, to the Serbian church.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, yeah, yeah. And I think there's one in St. Catherine's. Anyways, yeah. But yeah, so that's Geo. That's our first meeting. I love the way the light was coming across, and you were wearing a striped shirt and deep
Mm.
in thought. You had so much to share. So there we go.
Here's to many more years.
Definitely.
Unless World War III happens, then we're all kind of
Well,
bound.
let me
Then we're
stop you
really
right there.
screwed.
Let me stop you right there. Nothing ever happens.
Yeah,
Oh
nothing
yeah,
ever happens. Yeah, that's
yeah. I
true.
almost forgot. Nothing ever happens.
Shout out to my friend Horace Finkelstein. Nothing will ever happen.
Mm,
Hold the line.
yeah, hold the line.
But I suppose before we get too
Yes.
deep into any of the relevant topics, we should probably get some frontline news out of the way because quite a
Yep.
bit has happened in Ukraine.
Yes. Yes. I think since the last show that you and I did, and definitely since the last time Gio was on the show, uh, the city or the big town of Kurachovo has fallen, and this is an image of what the salient looks like now. Near the bottom of outlined in red, the tiny dot, that is Velika Novoselovka. Later on, as we go through map after map, we'll get a slightly better blow up of it. Now, some of this news is a little old. Um, so this represents basically the last 48 hours, give or take. So if we proceed to the next slide, which is a blow up southwest of Kurakovo, we see this area that the Russians have taken. Now they have taken a little bit more uh, territory today, but honestly, I don't have time for for every map that is like just recent. I work on these for quite a while. So, anyways, um, they're here going for Rozliv. Rozliv. This is going to this is it's a tiny village, but it's an area that they're going to have to develop because, as you can see, there's a string of fortifications north and west of Kurachovo. The next slide is Pokrovsk. And I've outlined in red where the city of Pokrovsk is. That's most of it. There's also Mirnograd, which is just to the right of the area outlined. As you can see in black, those are gains that were made in the last few days. In red, which are tiny, were made, I believe, sometime yesterday. The next slide is a blow up of it, and it's sort of directly underneath the area where I've outlined it. Now the Russians have crossed over this river. This is in the town of Zelenye. One of the startling things that happened is this town fell with just 2 Russian soldiers. They ended up going there, I believe, on motorcycles or scooters. They were not harassed, so this is a town that was unmanned. But there's also another interesting story about this whole Kurachovo and Pokrovsk front. Okay, and it revolves around the 155th Brigade, which now has become notorious because this was the brigade that was supposed to have been trained by France. And a brigade is roughly around 5,000 men. It varies from country to country. The French, I believe, trained around 2,000. The real number might have been, let's say, 1,975 or 1,950, roughly
2,000.
around there. Yeah, 2,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there were about 2,000 to 3,000, but they were not trained there. These guys were pulled off the street, and they were trained in Ukraine. So this was an elaborate process. They announced the creation of this brigade, I believe, in March or April of 2024. And training really didn't begin until August, which I thought was quite late.
Yes, and this was around the time Macron was saber rattling, talking about a European peacekeeping force in Ukraine.
Yes,
Those
yeah.
things all
Yeah.
coincided.
Yes, absolutely, right. Now, I'm not going to dwell on it too long because History Legends did a very in-depth analysis of this. But maybe some of the key points, one of them is that this brigade, as it was being formed, men and material, including those that were designated for the 155th that were trained in France, were being siphoned off. So this brigade was being depleted and sent to all other, to fill up other brigades. And how does this brigade relate to Kurachovo and Pokrovsk? Well, they were sent to Kurachovo, particularly in the south, in that salient that was forming along the river with those string of villages along it. And from what I understand, they took some heavy losses because a lot of these guys were not trained. So another salient fact is that they had very few drone operators and drones. And what happened was some of these guys who were trained to be drone operators were sent to the trenches. So you can see that there is a definite problem with shortages of troops. The other thing, of course, people make the tired joke about the French, being give up monkeys, or it's a very tired joke.
Cheese eating surrender monkeys.
Yeah. I mean, it's just whatever.
Stupid. Well, but World War One, yeah.
Yeah. Like, and part of the reason why in World War II there wasn't that much of a resistance is because a lot of French were sympathetic with Hitler and didn't like the direction that the West was going.
Yeah, like Mary Julian. What was his name was? Julius?
Yeah. So people go on about this, but 97% roughly of the 1,700 that left, went AWOL. 97% came from those that were trained in Ukraine, those that were mostly non-volunteers, conscripted off the street, thrown into buses. That's who, only 2.65% went AWOL in France. Okay, that's a very small number of the 2,000 that were there. Now, there were reports that, these guys were about 50 actually tried to, get away. Some succeeded in the village in France where they were being trained. Anyhow, so I thought that would be like just that's something interesting.
Well, the French, they have, because of the Foreign Legion, because of other factors, they have some of the best military training camps specifically catering to foreign troops from different armies around the world. The French have a huge track record of basically gearing up foreign armies. Even like terrorists have been trained by France. Like the guy that was
Yes.
part of Arkon's brigade in Serbia, he was a defector from the Foreign Legion, and he trained Arkon's tigers. If you remember that famous photo with the tiger, he was like holding the tiger cub. Yeah, all those guys were basically trained by a Frenchman.
Very interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, he paid him a shit ton of money to. The Foreign Legion did not like that, but it is what it is. But they have a track record of training foreign mercenaries and foreign troops, and they have a pretty good record globally. I mean, a lot of French-trained troops, for example, in Syria. Oh, I'm sorry, freedom fighters. They were capable of repelling Wagner in Aleppo, for example, for a little bit. But the guys training Ukraine. Like, have you seen those videos of them press ganging these guys, where they're like beating the shit out of them and throwing them in the van? Many videos, yeah.
And
there's literally hundreds of them if you're on Telegram.
You keep track of the geography of these videos. It creeps from east to west with every video.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, they're going everywhere. They're even going to parts of Western Ukraine, where they kind of believe someone else should be doing the fighting.
There was one video where the wife of a man who I believe was in his 30s was filming them, and it was a whole gang of like 5 black-suited, probably SBU agents that were like just kicking the guy's head in and throwing him in the van, and that's just one among many. Yeah, but yeah, go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah. So the next slide is a blow up. It shows that the Shevchenko, the village of Shevchenko, was captured. And the Russians have now started moving above the river that's divided this area of what I would call the eastern part of the Pokrovsk front. It's really an area that is situated between Pokrovsk and Toretsk. And the next slide will show you that. So the next slide, Konstantin, so in the upper right-hand corner or towards it, that's Toretsk, and the area that is being whittled away at by the Russians, near this bottom center, that's an area that is sort of halfway between Pokrovsk and Toretsk. And one of the theories is you can see where the Ukrainian fortifications are. There's a ring that goes above it. So one of the ideas is that because Toretsk right now is about 90% captured, and it will, I think, by Friday or Saturday, that city is done.
Do they have full strike capabilities in all regions of the city? The Russians, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, there's one industrial area where the Ukrainians in the northwestern part of the city that the Ukrainians are still lodged in, but really 90% of Toretsk is gone. So anyways, you can see that this massive salient, and one idea is that the Russians are going to slowly start to try to enclose on this salient, and then a blow up of the area of the capture. This is in the area of Shevchenko. Roughly speaking, it's not exactly, but it's close. And then the next slide is a blow up of Toretsk, and you can see the rapid gains that the Russians have been making there, much more rapid than what's going on in Chesov Yar. South of Chesov Yar, the Ukrainians made a successful counterattack and took about half the territory that the Russians had taken a few weeks ago. But in any case,
Look, see, they're winning.
yeah, yes. So you can see. So just study this map of Toretsk. So on the left side, that's, you can consider that a suburb. It's not Toretsk proper. Um, Novospassky. The other one, it's the lettering is obscured, so I can't read it properly. Leonidovka is a town that they had taken a few weeks back. This is an area where the Ukrainians back in October and November had some successful counterstrikes, but the Russians, as you can see, they've just been going at it anyways, and they've taken over more and more terracons. And as you can see, there are only three terracons that are still under Ukrainian control. I imagine the one in the center, where recent Russian gains are, I imagine there's actually nobody there. But north of the city, there is some trench network and an industrial area. So that's basically what's left of Toretsk. And I mentioned Chasov Yar. So this is actually from yesterday. So this is Chasov Yar. As I said in the previous show, the Russians captured half the industrial plant. The Ukrainians rushed in and pushed them out, but the Russians kept moving westward with that salient to the north that you see. And then late yesterday, they started advancing furthermore, and now basically they're at the point of cutting off the industrial plant that we see here. I don't know if they make bricks here. One source said that they did. Now, what's interesting is this industrial plant is a lot smaller than Korakhovo, but Korakhovo fell much more quickly. I think I think the Ukrainians fully understand how important Chasov Yar is, and I think that's why they have always favored protecting Chasov Yar over other regions like Korakhovo, let's say, or Velika Novoselovka. And so we can go to the next slide. Gives you a better idea of this area that the Russians took yesterday. So they control most of the residential area. You can see that oblong shape that is surrounded by the red, or mostly surrounded in a pincer movement. That's the industrial plant that the Ukrainians still hold. It's not as I mean, it's not totally easy because, of course, it's flanked by apartment buildings immediately to the southwest of it. But getting to it, supplying it will be much more difficult now. For the Ukrainians. Now, the next front is, I hastily called it the Kremenaya Svatovo front. This is the area around Liman. Kremenaya and Svatovo are towns that the Russians control, right? And you can see that what the Russians are up to here. They want to move from the sort of the southern flank of Kupiansk down along the Oskol River, while in the south, the arrow pointing shows you that they want to consolidate more gains around the Zherebets River, and they want to cut off the salient before moving any further down. The Russians made many attempts going straight across. That is in the southern part, the area that is outlined underneath the bottom arrow. With not much success at all, or the success wouldn't last for very long. But they have made some gains nonetheless this week, particularly in Makiivka. And so, yes, so you can see the next slide what they're doing now. They are going to have to go uphill, and you can see this area the Ukrainians have very well fortified, and the Russians less so. But maybe the Russians' greater firepower will make a difference. And then the next slide is to just confuse the viewers even more. This is further north. These are gains that the Russians made, I believe, yesterday, Ivanovka, near Novosadove. So, yes.
How's
They
Chasov Yar going? Are they surrounding it? Or
I mean, I just showed you, like,
It's a
I
few
would say
maps up in the chat.
Yeah, I would
if you
say,
want a deeper
yeah,
view.
I would say over 50% of it is taken. Like I
Yeah.
said, the industrial area and some apartment complex buildings are what the Ukrainians still control. But I think the Ukrainians are going to put in a lot of manpower, and the Russians are not putting in as much effort there as Pokrovsk. The heaviest fighting that we're seeing now is still in the Pokrovsk-Kurakhove area. That seems what the Russians are most intent on
Well,
succeeding in
there's a
doing.
fortification line from Pokrovsk all the way. There's a yellow line all the way up to
Yes.
Novoukrayinka. So that
Yeah.
is a huge buildup there. And who
Yes.
knows how
Yes.
long it'll take for them? Maybe by the summer they'll get to that point.
It's possible. It's
Yeah.
possible. Like I say, I usually say that the Russians just are going to go at the pace that they're going at.
Yeah.
There isn't going to be any. Drone warfare has completely changed. There's just it gives you a kind of reconnaissance and idea in real time of like drone warfare plus satellites have changed war tactics completely.
Yeah.
But the only way big maneuver warfare works is if the other side doesn't have those capabilities, right? And so the next slide is further north in the Svatova area. This is south of Kupiansk. So yeah, you can take a look at that. And then the next slide is a blow up of this field that the Russians have taken, but it's a fortification. And you can see with my crudely drawn arrow how they're going to hug along the Oskal River. That Oskal River goes all the way down to Liman, which is a very, very important hub that the Russians used to control till the Ukrainians pushed them out in, I believe it was like September of 2022.
Yes, it was the first
Yeah.
counteroffensive where they withdrew
That's
from
right.
Liman, and they haven't recovered it since.
Yes. And then we come to Kursk.
What they
So
call
here's
Krasny Liman.
yeah, Krasny. Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Alex Mercurius. Krasny Limon.
Well, there's a huge buildup of Slavyansk, right? Like that's pretty much I think there's a forward operating base around there. Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a nice man, but I'm gonna be honest. I was shocked when I found out he had a wife and kids. But
He's got a young wife that has
a young
like,
wife, yeah,
young kids, yeah.
he does. They're little. They're
Well, it's
little.
British, you know. I mean, a lot of British professional types they marry later in life, and
True. True.
they have a kept woman, you know.
Me and the missus. So, yeah.
Who's that? Like that one woman? He was talking to her. You know, she met my family. She's got like that Russian woman. Like she's like in her like mid-50s, but she's got this impossible figure. I mean, certain Russian women they age very well. You know, like
I'm not sure.
what's her name? She's like very short, very skinny, blonde woman. Something World Report. I forget.
Okay, I know there's a Polish woman that they've done some shows with.
I think it may be the Polish woman. Yeah.
She's very, very slim.
Yeah.
Like too slim. But anyway, so so yeah, I don't know, Konstantin, have you shown the Kursk map?
No, not yet. No,
okay. So this is the Kursk map. I've outlined where
I saw some footage from Kursk. Did you see like the bodies just littering the ground and
yeah. So you know, there's all kinds of debates about how many forces the Ukrainians have brought there. Some said 5 brigades. The Russians are saying more like a little over 5 battalions. So it's a big difference. The Russians moved around 15,000 troops into this area. I think they suspected something would happen there. Now, you know, we
plus 20,000 North Koreans. You can't forget about them.
Oh yeah. Did you see in the Lex Friedman? Oh my God.
Well, I think
in the Lex Friedman interview, Zelensky is talking about the Koreans. My favorite part isn't when he says they bring 12,000. Next it will be 30,000. They can do that. My favorite part is because they burn their faces. So you can't. He's saying that the Koreans burn the faces of their own men when they're fallen, because they don't want the world to know that they're there. It's
total
like, why? like they literally have a treaty with Russia. Like if either country is attacked, the other side can fight for it. It's the North Koreans that asked to fight anyways. So
This is all just
I mean,
projection,
they're
considering the
not.
amount of foreign mercenaries are in Ukraine. Like,
Yeah,
Well,
I still go ahead.
it kills me because the conflicting narratives around the Ukraine war, the Russians, they're all Asiatic, they're all Asians, but somehow we know these are Koreans. But then we'll also ignore the fact, despite the fact that we think all Russians are Asians, they must be white. They're fighting here, and then we're also going to ignore the amount of Asian population that exists in the far east of Russia, who have been disproportionately joining because of the economic benefits of military service as part of the new recruitment drive. But no, they're all Koreans because we need to drum up a narrative of the hordes from the east coming in order
Yeah,
to attack pure white as snow Ukraine, who, as we know, they would never resort to having Tatar mercenaries. They would never resort to recruiting
Chechens.
distant Chechens. They would never
yeah,
resort to Colombians or former jihadists. No, the Ukrainian army is all pure European stock.
yeah. It's so ridiculous. I mean, they literally train some of the jihadis that are killing Christians and Alawites in Syria right now. And you're right. In 2022 and 2023, there were a lot of these jihadis that were fighting with the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians had no problem with that. Of course, the Chechens have been fighting alongside Ukrainians. Dissident Chechens have been fighting with Ukrainians against Russians for a very long time, for
Our
for
base
decades.
Muslim allies versus your Asiatic hordes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So exactly. So that's the situation in Kursk. I don't know. This offensive has been going on for 5 or 6 days. It's like there were three Russian counteroffensives. The third one was, like, I would say, the least successful. The other two were quite successful because they took back 60% of the territory that the Ukrainians had taken. And one measure, according to Weeb Union, that I heard today or yesterday was uh, the Ukrainians made a gain of 22 square kilometers, and the Russians made a gain of 18 kilometers. So a difference of 4 kilometers, 4 square kilometers in Ukraine's favor.
oh,
Like it's. I mean, I've never, because we surmised, right? We were talking about this, like, where will they go? They need to throw the Russians off. Defending the eastern part is it might be futile, or it might. I mean, like, if, like, you can well imagine if the Ukrainians put all their forces, like, not everybody, I know a lot. There was a lot of desertion, but they're not all deserting. You could say that. I don't know. I just think that the Kursk thing is such a media ploy. Like, technically, yes, they've invaded a part of Russia. That's true. You can hold on to that. Like, that can give you all kinds of good feels, but it has cost them so much. Like, in 2024, the Russians regained something like 3,370 or 56 or 64 miles, right? So, like, just under 3,400 sorry, 3,400 square kilometers, right? And then these guys, they're down to like 460 square kilometers in Russia. So, I mean, that's the deficit. And the thing is, they lost important towns in 2024. So they lost Kurakovo, they lost Ochertina, they lost Avdeevka, they lost Ugledar. Like, all of this, they lost over 50% of Cheslav Yar. Um, I don't know. Was that worth it? I mean, we'll get into it. All the, like, the potential peace deal and all that. But let's keep moving. So that's the situation. Um, uh, if you want to, I don't know, Constantine, do you want to ignore the next two slides? I mean, I think that overview of, because the Russians, Suja is a complex of villages. So the Russians are about 2.5 kilometers out of the one of the villages that has a concentric orientation around Suja. So they're closing in on that area. Um, so the area that I've outlined here is Velika Novoselovka. And I don't have the map, but the Russians have moved further west of here. But in this slide, you can see that Velika Novoselovka is quite surrounded. The blow-up will show you just how much of the city is surrounded. Now, it's not a city, right? Velika Novoselovka. So Novoselo is new village, right? Because like Indo-European cell, like a cell, literally round, is what Slavic people use to describe a village because it always had one central area. And velik is great, or to veli is to announce, which might be related to the Latin word vellum. Only important things were written on vellum for an order to speak. Anyhow, that's my little conspiracy theory.
Please, more language autism.
So Velika Novoselovka just means like the great new villages, the area of the new villages, the big new villages. So
yeah, just an anecdote. When I first heard about this front, I knew that Veliki was great. I knew that Novo was new, so I just kind of put things together.
That's right.
You just need to know a few key words, and a lot of things fall into place.
Yeah. It's like Slavic languages are very modular. They're incredibly modular. Like there's a really strict logic what kind of suffix and prefix is used, and yeah, that's how they remind me of Lego. There's a really stringent logic. I'm not kidding you. They really are like that, right?
I'll save the tangent, but I'm working through Serbian right now in anticipation of near future travel, and I have to agree so far.
Yeah. So they really are like that. So, anyways, so let's go to the blow up of Velika Novoselovka, and you can see how close the Russians are there. All those string of villages that the Russians lost in the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the summer of 2023, they've regained, and so now they're just at the doorstep. They're sort of from the bottom, closing on Neskuchne, from the central western part, Vremovka, they're getting close there, and Velika Novoselovka, they already have a foothold that they've had there for several weeks. And maybe just briefly, ignore this slide. We've already discussed Korachovo. I'm going to show you the Kupiansk front because this is something that has been developing. The Ukrainians have had some very successful counterattacks to force the Russians out of the western side of the Oskol River, but the Russians have persisted, and this is a salient that just keeps building. So in this slide, you can see where Kupiansk is. And you can see that north of it, that black outline and the red outline, which is today or yesterday, that's on the other side of the Oskol River, right? And so the Russians what they'll want to do is attack Kupiansk from both fronts, because there's literally only one bridge linking Kupiansk from Kupiansk East with Kupiansk West, which would have all kinds of horrendous results for the Russians if they dared to attack it head on. So, what they'll want to do is surround it. And then the last slide is just a blow up of it. You can see that the areas that they've taken very close to the village of Zapatne. And that's it for the updates. We can get into all kinds of news, news from Ukraine. There was an attack in near the Engels Air Force Base. The Ukrainians launched a very large drone attack, which impacted. Now the Russians say they shot them all down, and the debris from one fell onto an oil refinery. I mean, they hit the oil refinery. Okay, so
yeah, it's just par for the course. That's how they announce.
It's par for the course. Yeah, and so, but the other thing that's happened is, okay, so earlier last week, the Russians finally took some of their gloves off, and they hit the Rada and the Bank of Ukraine in downtown Kiev. They hit it with drones. So now you can see that they're like they don't care. But you know
Is
about
this the most anti-Semitic attack since October 7th?
I think so.
Oh,
um, so so those two were hit late last week. It could have been Friday or Thursday, and then today the Motor Sich plant in Zaporozhye was hit. So this is a plant that used to make jet engines for airplanes, and the Chinese bought it many years ago in order to develop it. The Russians blowing this up, and unfortunately, there are civilian casualties. I saw the fallout. There's at least 2 or 3 dead civilians from the photos that I saw, but they dropped the Fab 500 on it. So you can see that the Russians are willing to do a lot more damage now than they did before. There's probably all sorts of reasons. Now, I personally do not think that there's going to be any kind of breakthrough with negotiations. If they are, the forecast seems to indicate that it'll probably be sometime in March. So, there's still about 50, 60 days till then. So that's quite a bit. That could be something that's prompting the Russians to do this. The other is they're just tired of, you see horrendous videos like in the Kursk region. I saw a video of Ukrainians driving over Russian soldiers who are running away from an armored personnel carrier, and they're just, they're putting AC/DC in the background. Like this is like
God.
the most based heroic thing they've ever done. Like running after a guy that doesn't even have a rifle. Anyhow, so who probably tried to surrender. Anyways, but you see this. And I've never seen the Russians do this. I've never seen the Russians literally, but I've seen many videos of the Ukrainians driving over soldiers with tanks or armored personnel carriers. So
I'd say the worst I've seen the Russians do, and not to justify it, is just summary executions. But
yeah, I've
and
seen
like I
Yeah.
said,
that.
I hate to say it given what it actually is, but in the context of a war, it's a given.
Yeah. Plus, it is also a lot of revenge, right? I think everybody has seen the video of the fight between the Ukrainian and the Yakutan guy from Siberia. That is one of the most gruesome things I've ever seen.
I can't believe he
It's,
won. Because like
yeah,
that Ukrainian was pretty built. Like it's
he
yeah.
was built, and like the Ukrainian, I was confused because I thought the Yakut guy had the knife, and then
Yeah.
I see the Ukrainian has the knife. So the Ukrainian took the knife off of him, and the Yakut got the knife back somehow.
Holy yeah.
That was just, and it really, like the way it ended. The guy said, "I'm done for it. Just stop." The Ukrainian guy says, he said, "Let me say goodbye to my mother and the sky." I just thought that was,
Yeah.
anyways. I'm not I'm confused about this part, but the Yakutan guy said that the he gave him a grenade. He basically put a grenade to put him out of his misery. Now, I don't know if the Ukrainian really wanted that or not, but that's the story that some people have said.
Well, the
Anyways,
Yakut fucked
it's,
up because he approached that building or was the
yeah.
Yakut in the building?
Yeah, no, the Yakut was in the building. It was the Ukrainian guy, because this is a 15-minute video, and the
Yeah.
first 7 minutes of the video are literally this Ukrainian guy scoping around the building, but not going in, and nothing happens. You don't hear anything. You hear some drones buzzing around, but they look like they might have been. I mean, it was a Russian drone that filmed the whole thing. Of course, most of the footage that most people see is
Was the
from
GoPro
the
footage, yeah.
yeah, of the Ukrainian. Now, I could not stomach the whole thing. I saw bits and pieces of it, even in the worst moments. I could not watch it. It just makes me too sad, honestly. And And I did see the video from above, which is obviously a video by the Russians. In any case, so the guy is scoping around. He's trying to figure out what happens, what he ought to do. He seems well motivated and everything, and like he's got some experience. And and he went in, and he got shot right away. The Ukrainian did, but he still stood and fought. So very brave, and the Russians noted that, and they were very sad from his passing, and they really have a lot of respect for him. And
the only thing you could really say is he should have maybe waited for someone else. If there was another Ukrainian soldier, that Yakut would have been done for. It would have been over.
Oh, it would have been totally over. In fact, the Yakut guy said the reason he went with like so much ferocity against this Ukrainian is because the Ukrainians had killed his friend. Now, I don't know if it was the same day or a few hours earlier, a few minutes earlier, or like there was no time given when but something tells me it was like in recent memory, like a few days, the Ukrainians had killed his friend, and so his blood boiled, and so to speak, and
fog of war as well.
Yeah. And maybe he knew that this unit would not spare him, so he might as well go for it instead of continuing to hide in the house, because you could tell the Ukrainian was pretty sure somebody was probably still in there. And it was very horrific, the scene where he's biting the Ukrainian's hand. Oh my God, it's just all the blood. It's just unbelievable.
Well, he shot and stabbed him, and the Ukrainian kept coming till I guess.
And like I said, the Ukrainian took the knife and started stabbing him.
Oh man.
Oh, like it's just, honestly, it's like one of the most brutal things I've ever seen. In photos I've seen of the Yakutan guy, his right ear is cut. Something is wrong there. It's like, it's black. It looks blackened, and like there's a part of the ear missing. You know how blood turns black?
Yeah.
Like a deep, deep, dark red. So extremely violent. Definitely like, I've seen some videos that I never want to see again in this war. This is just one of them. So yeah, that's kind of like what's going on with Ukraine. I don't know if you guys want to talk more about like, what do you think 2025 is going to be like for the Russo-Ukrainian war?
Constantine, you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
I think that, well, definitely the war will last another year, if that. It'll probably last another 2 years. But it really depends on how the winter goes in Ukraine. I know that's like a basic take. I don't have like a galaxy brain Nostradamus take, but it really depends on if Ukraine, in conjunction with the West helping them, can sustain their population, because it looks like this winter in Europe is actually going to be more severe than in previous years during the war. So, and whether the Russians choose to bomb the remaining power system is also another thing that's up in the air. I mean, it looks like the Russians are sort of done playing around, and I think the force of victory,
they've taken out over 75% of their energy system for heating.
Now they could convert to coal heating.
Yes, that's true.
But then what are the Russians going to do? They'll just bomb the mine shafts. They'll just That's the thing, because if the Russians, they do possess nominal strike capability throughout Ukraine. So my greatest fear would be around the summer, if the Ukrainian army experiences not a mass collapse, but at least a partial collapse that would force them to go out of Kursk, that would force them out of these bordering towns. I fear if the British and the French have enough autism to actually have some kind of occupying force in Lvov or Odessa. Because then you know what can happen in any war.
Yeah.
Any anti-air missile or any munitions can go astray, and like what happens if an official French soldier gets killed? It's like, not the mercenaries, I mean like an actual occupying force. So, but I think that the Europeans, obviously with Trump, would they have more or less of an incentive to go full out? That's the big thing. because it seems that the Europeans, like you were saying this in the last show, when it comes to Biden, it's like, yeah, we'll do whatever you want. But when it comes to Trump asking them the same thing, it's like, no, fuck you, you're a fascist. Who knows what's going to happen if it's this Trump term as opposed to 2016, which they still viewed as a historical anomaly. It really all depends on what the Western Europeans are willing to do in order to help Ukraine. But I mean, I say this knowing that there could be rather small, but there is a possibility that by the summer the Ukrainian army could be tapped. But I don't think so. I predict that they'll probably still fight for another year at least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but it all depends on the winter. If you have people legitimately suffering in Ukraine, especially Western Ukraine, and the West can't get enough generators, they can't supply enough ability to convert coal or liquid natural gas. If the Russians keep bombing supply lines, then who knows what's going to happen. But yeah,
I think the Russians will. I mean, they already have killed NATO trainers and generals in Ukraine from the onset of the war. I don't think there's no compunction withholding them from repeating that. I have a weird take that it has been developing for me in the last couple of weeks, and I think the strategy that the West probably wants is, because Europe is not going to want to go into Ukraine. The longer this war has gone on, the less enthusiasm Europe has to go in. And that has really worked to Russia's strategy. And the more bad news for the longer period of time, this willingness decreases more and more. They can talk all they want about we can't lose, we can't lose, we can't. I mean, yeah, you can lose, yes, and it happens. So my take is that the destruction of Iran would facilitate like a Pyrrhic victory for the Russians. And the reason I say that, right? So the way the Russians have gone, like, it's brilliant. What the Russians have done for their trade, particularly with India, is they have the rail system is already complete. It's all done. But what they do is they transport their goods from, let's say, the St. Petersburg area and Moscow. And by train, this goes down towards the Caspian. And from the Caspian, it goes down either, again, by train, but often also by ship. And it reaches northern Iran. Iran has now a rail system that then goes to the Persian Gulf and trades with India. Okay. If you take Iran out of the picture, Russia is stuck. Right? At that moment, it's stuck. And I would not doubt that the Turks are also in favor of a war against Iran and Azerbaijan, because I think a lot of Russians, for instance, are very upset with the amount of leeway that Putin has given the Turks, especially with regards to Syria. Remember that, after nearly 10 years of fighting, that the Russians did lose roughly around 4,000 guys. Now, that's still less than half of what the Americans lost in Iraq. And I know people say, no, dude, it was only yes, it was 4,570 something soldiers, but the contractors are jobs that armies always did. The reason they have contractors is because it hides losses. And many armies to this day still do the job of contractors, engineering and whatnot. But in total, the Americans lost about a little over 9,000. So, destroying Iran puts Russia in an awkward position, and the Islamicization, the radicalization of the Turkmen countries, some of them will be bolstered by the victory in Syria. Now, Tajikistan and some of the other stands, they have already outlawed the several versions of this. What's the word I'm looking for? the garb that the Muslim women wear
The
that covers
niqab,
every. Yeah,
the
yeah,
trash
the
bag.
niqab.
Hijab or niqab.
Yeah, so they've been outlawed, and even some European countries have outlawed them. And anyways, so in a way, a lot of the regimes in Central Asia are not ready for this. They don't want this. So I would say the focus on Iran isn't just about Israel, although Israel
Well, that's a
is
big part of it.
responsible. Israel is very much responsible for it, particularly with Iraq. They tried to construe that it was Osama bin Laden, like who was working through Saddam. I mean, that was just preposterous. The other thing is, the other connection is, Assad is usually blamed for not going along with the Qatari pipeline that was supposed to go through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and then Turkey. Turkey would become the hub. And then ultimately the line would terminate in Greece and Bulgaria. But the thing is what Assad wanted was, he figured, well, we have seaports in the Eastern Mediterranean. Why does it need to go to Turkey? So he wanted the hub. And this is back like in 2009 when his wife, she's a British citizen, you know, he had dinners with John Kerry and
In a period of
even
détente with the West. He was
yeah,
very
yeah,
much
he was
courting
looking
the
for.
Western powers. At that point, had purged actually a lot of his father's old guard in order to
That's
reach
right.
out to them.
That's right. That's right. And of course that's where all the U.S. rendition stuff happened. Because if the U.S. would do it, then it would be considered um, war crimes. So they gave it to the Assad regime to do this, right? And it's Erdogan who was upset with Assad of wanting the hub. That is what launched it. Now, but that doesn't really answer everything, right? Erdogan is a proud, but also can be and clever. He's a clever guy. He's a crafty guy, but he's also a stupid and emotional guy. And I'm gonna tell you why.
He's Turkish?
Yeah.
Ouch. I will not have you talk about road. Anyways, so
Huh.
okay, here's why. We're supposed to believe that as Gaddafi is brutally killed in Libya, and America starts transporting all these jihadis from Libya to Syria and giving them weapons, which they had given them to fight against Gaddafi. Like, was this at the behest of Erdogan? No, Erdogan is not the catalyst for this. Erdogan is a willing puppet in this because he thinks he can gain something from it, but he's not the initiator of this. I think it's an important distinction, right? He's willing to betray Assad because he has his reasons. But now Qatar is probably not going to build a pipeline because you know well, I mean, 15 years later, they have this LNG and they get a lot more money delivering LNG than pipe gas. And, Qatar doesn't have good relations with Saudi Arabia. So,
On top of the
like in many
reconciliation
ways,
with Iran over the past few years.
right. And in many ways, the pipeline, and I fell for it, the pipeline um, was a really big deal back when the war started. And it was at a peak when Russia intervened in September 2015, right? And that was supposed to explain everything and why it happened. But it would go through so many transit fees, 4 or 5 countries before it reaches Europe, that how much money would Qatar make off of it? Right. I think Qatar is smart. They're gonna do the LNG thing and they're gonna go where the market takes them. And so I don't think that pipeline is ever going to happen. And now Syria is so destabilized. So, anyways, I'm getting really off track. But I think that the American and Israeli strategy is to destroy Iran because if you do it, you affect Russia. You affect Russia, actually China too. Russia, China, and Iran. The question is, how much is Russia willing to protect Iran? Now they're sending more S-400 systems, and I know you hear all this talk. Now with Syria out of the way, the Israelis can freely bomb Iran. Okay, let me point something out. The Israelis use Jordanian and Lebanese airspace all the time,
And Iraqi
and they did
airspace.
an Iraqi airspace. Like, remember that attack that they did after the Iranians launched some pretty sophisticated missiles, and one of them hit like a hangar where the Israeli F-35s are, and one of them hit near the nuclear power plant. Well, or a place where they store nuclear missiles, we suppose. Um, like Israel doesn't need to use Syria to bomb Iran. Like I don't know why this has become like such a thing.
No,
Like
it was
it's a bullshit story. It's a bullshit story. It's not real.
yeah, it was never a
It's even
question.
shorter to use Jordan. If you use the full extension of Jordan and bypass Syria, it's actually an even shorter flight to hit Iran. Well, okay, it depends on where, but like again, it's not important.
And let's be honest,
So
if they slipped in the Saudi airspace, do you think the Saudis would react? No.
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. They're not going to do anything. And so so I guess what I'm saying is wanting to end the Assad regime, I think, had very little to do with that pipeline. I've had to change my mind about that. Um, it has more to do with destroying Iran than a pipeline that Qatar is never going to build, right? Because the Azerbaijanis wanted to build a pipeline as well, and now there's a kind of a dispute about that. Like um, the Azerbaijanis, I'm trying to find the. I did a. Please forgive me. I did a screen cap of this. Now, of course, typical Grant, he can't find it. Uh, so, well, you know what? I'm gonna send you this, Constantine. This will give you this will kind of explain what I'm talking about.
Okay, let me just get it up here, and you can continue on your point as you were.
Yeah. So, darn it, I just can't find. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So this pipeline was supposed to be called the Nabucco, the Nabucco pipeline. It was supposed to come from Azerbaijan, but it turns out that it was actually from Turkmenistan. There was there were squabbles between some of the stand countries bordering the Caspian Sea. But the pipeline's construction, which is about 30 kilometers, began in Turkmenistan, and then it was dropped. So that's another pipeline that never happened. We have brought it up over the years about this pipeline, and I think we brought it up when we had George on the show, George McMillan. So, anyways, I just I wanted to say that. So yeah, I think as you can see in the graphic I sent you, you can see how short the line is for the Russians to just go use the Caspian Sea, and how convenient it is for Iran to ship stuff to India. All of these countries are BRIC nations. So
Well,
yes.
I just did want to loop around both of your points here because I think you both brought up some very important stuff. So, focusing on Ukraine immediately, I think one of the biggest tells of the direction of the war is that the conscription age has, yes, finally been lowered to 18, and
Oh,
that
Oh
they are not
boy.
holding back on that. And as I have said before, you do have the legal conscriptions, of course, legal being very loose definition of the word. But we
To which there
know,
will be a bunch of illegal 16-year-olds, for example,
yes,
going off to the front.
exactly.
yes, exactly.
Because right now they're illegally conscripting 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds. Well, that's going to be illegal, so they're going to move down the chain, as it were. If you're 15, 16, look like enough an adult, you're getting thrown in the TCC van, and you're getting sent off to the front
That kid
lines.
kind of looks pretty old for his age.
Yeah, it's going to
Yeah.
be exactly that, and it's going to be a complete slaughter. I don't even want to imagine where it would go. To return to the point about the winter, I did have a few things to add to that. So even if the Russians don't continue their infrastructure attacks, we will see how damaged the infrastructure is from the previous waves of attacks throughout the past 3 years, but once again also going into just the more recent attacks from this year onward. and we'll see how much the Ukrainian grid can weather the upcoming winter. And then to add an element, because of the current energy disputes with Ukraine finally canceling the transit agreement with Russia, where Slovakia, Hungary, and other Central and Eastern European nations will be starved out from gas right now. Will the Hungarians and the Slovaks take retaliatory measures and cut off the electricity? I know as a precaution to that, Poland has already started to lend electricity from their grid to Ukraine, but the question is, how much can Poland spare? What are energy costs in Poland? And also, Tusk is a very wishy-washy figure, at least at this point in the war in Ukraine, because he has hit some roadblocks with the Ukrainians where he hasn't been as pro-Ukraine as you expect. Of course, he is pro-Ukraine. So it is interesting. What are the limits of Poland willing to assist Ukraine, and what is the upper limit on that? I think is another factor that you have to look at when it comes to that. As for the situation on the front line, I do agree that this war could potentially go on for about another 2 years. I don't want to start making predictions, but it does depend on, I think, once again, to return to what we've all said this winter, I don't know how the morale will hold up on the front lines, especially with the conscription of 18-year-olds. Is this going to be the final point? How much more abuse can the Ukrainian people take? I think is the big question. I think that's been the
Hmm.
question since the beginning of the war, and I don't want to be one of those people who say, it's going to happen this time. Of course, nothing
No,
ever
of course
happens, as
not.
we know. But I do think 18-year-old conscription, 18 and up, is completely uncharted territory, and we could see some ramifications from that because you've already seen pushback against the TCC officers. You've already seen these guerrilla attacks, if you will, against their conscription vans, against their offices, especially in places
Yeah.
like Odessa, in places like Kharkov, in these areas where you expect more Russian sympathies. So if it does get younger and younger, and you start taking people's kids, because at that point, many of them still are children, and even in that part of the world, especially, a lot of them still with their parents. They aren't quite independent. They aren't adults in any meaningful sense beyond legal definition. When you start quite literally taking people's kids off the street, I think that's when it could get
Oh
very
yeah.
violent
Yeah.
in a civil sense.
Well, there probably are like ideologically motivated 18-year-olds that like go on Telegram and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm gonna be like the Einsatzgruppen," but I think like there is. So I mean, again, I don't want to like discount Ukrainian patriotism, but I think to the point where these press gangs are looking at like literal 16-year-olds, granted that are probably more mature in Eastern Europe than they are in like say Western Europe or in America or in Canada, but like I mean, to the point where that happens, then you're going to get a lot of very fucked up social relations, and you'll have parents basically fighting them off, which it won't be a very good look. To which Russian Telegram channels can then VK, and then Telegram can then propagandize and say like, "Oh, look what they're doing to their own citizens."
Yeah,
So,
Volga
but
149, they'll all
yeah,
over the place. It's
yeah, like the Right People Z will have
yeah.
like tons of videos of that. But but GSP, you're saying that the fall of Iran would actually not be as devastating for Russia as
Oh
people
no, it
think.
would be
Uh,
devastating.
yes, and we
Yeah,
touched on this last episode where
And for China, because China signed a huge, huge agreement with trade agreement with the
yeah.
Iranians. The, the the biggest amount of trade for Iran is with China. So
I think that would, if anything, that would incentivize.
and remember, it was Iranians that wanted to kill Blumf.
Yeah.
well, I did want to
Remember
return.
that story?
No, but I think the Chinese angle. Obviously, the Chinese have more pull with the Western world than the Russians. I mean, that's an obvious fact. I think a Trump administration, that would be really the only incentivization for them to pull back from attacking Iran. Because if the Chinese step in, because Trump has been kind of conciliatory to Xi Jinping, the Chinese really did want to step in and say, listen, like we rely on the, as much as you hate the Russians and much as Israelis hate the Iranians, we rely on the Iranians just as much as we rely on the Indians or the North Koreans. So, but then again, if you have like crazy ultra Zionists, for example, that are in the Trump administration, then all bets are off, right?
Oh, totally. All bets are off.
There
Yeah,
was
yeah.
this great, really quickly, there was this great I mentioned him on the show before, and you know, being one of the first Maronites, I don't agree with all of his takes. Like his take on inheritance tax or meritocracy can get kind of convoluted. But Mika Groiper, back in 2019, and my good friend Garrick Obama, he shared these screen caps from Mika Groiper in 2019, and it really goes to show how the Obama years, really, the failure of Obama really cemented a lot of things that were happening now. How the American regime, of course, he calls it something different, which word I'm not going to use because I am a face lord, but it starts with a Z, ends with a G.
Zigzag.
How it zigzags, yeah. So how like really the failure of Obama to not press forward in the Middle East, how that sets the stage for Russia having a way better time, for Iran sort of escaping by the skin of its teeth, even though its rulership class, the Ayatollahs, are sclerotic and less reactive. So here's Mika Groiper. One is from 2019, the other one's from 2021. I have yet to see anyone explain how the U.S. ruling class did not fuck up 2011 to 2024. Or sorry, I have not yet to see anyone explain how the U.S. ruling class did not fuck up 2011 to 2014 in foreign policy terms. The Arab Spring was what every blue check policy wonk, such as Matty Iglesias, wanted in the 2000s. They could have had it unless it was either balkanization, cynical framing, or genuine regime change. Yeah, the testing social media psyops, Obama was great at that. It makes sense at the time. But why the fuck would you destabilize long-term cooperative puppets such as Mubarak, cheer the revolution, the Islamists, then coup d'etat your own psyop within a year, such as in Egypt, while doing nothing to intervene in the actual target of Syria? There was a, quote, 4chan thread which claimed the military simply refused to obey Beijing Barry because it would start a war with Russia. This is the closest to an explanation or an esoteric explanation I can come up with, or that I've seen. If they had treated Assad like Gaddafi in 2011, there would also be no Russian intervention in Ukraine. There would be too scared. The Z word would have been, I do not endorse the use of this word, by the way, just for public record. But let's call it the regime would have been looking at close to final victory in 2014. And here we have in 2019, which was more recent than 2011, or sorry, 2021, by Mika, and of course he's another burner account. The reversal of the regime's geopolitical fortunes between 2012 and 2014 continues to seem unlooked for me. No scholar would ever touch it, and was Obama's real legacy, rather a negative legacy. Maidan Putsch, Russian election protests, Arab Springs, they truly were at the peak of their power. They could have swept at all their foes from the chessboard all at once. Had Obama not been such a pussy, Syria could have been balkanized by 2013, Putin's overthrow and the stage set for war from girl boss Hillary Clinton's invasion of Iran in as early as 2017, and the completion of the entire Zionist grand scheme in the Middle East. Compared with what they were 2 years later, Russia had destroyed the whole principle of the post-war order and Fukuyama's end of history. Syria was locked into a stalemate, and Iran acknowledged as having a right to intervene there. It just makes me wonder why exactly Obama was so chary with intervention, given he had no real ideological disagreement with quote-unquote neocons. His behavior with Egypt, for example, makes no sense, but is incompetence. I imagine some sort of blackmail was involved towards him.
I mean,
incredible takes, by the way. Incredible takes.
Yeah, very good take. But I think I can explain it.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my take is Obama. What Obama wanted was a kind of U.S. protectorate of Gaza.
Yeah.
Right, and this is what fueled the anger from Netanyahu to fund Finkelstein to do the campaign for Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
Okay. In 2012. Okay, I agree with you. The Arab Spring did not go as planned, especially with reference to Egypt.
Oh yeah.
Now, Russia did say to Obama, at least if we were to believe any of it, that if you go in, if you try to just, we will hit you, right? And Obama was not going to cross that red line. His strategy, okay, his strategy was to pull Russia into Ukraine
With
by
Maidan.
using, yeah, by using the Maidan, and to diplomatically steal away Iran from Russia. In 2012, 2014, 2015, Iran cooperation with Iran and Russia is not what it is today. Okay, and so that's why he did not give them pallets full of money. He gave them money that was theirs anyways, that the U.S. had seized. That's all. It didn't come out of America's pocket. It wasn't America's to begin with. And so the way he saw it, okay, and you could say that Obama is part of, like, he's some kind of a creature of the woke globalist.
Yeah, transnational progressivism. Yeah.
Yeah, and Blum, these guys are more, they're Zios, and that is why they wanted to defeat uh, Obama so much, right? Or his legacy, which probably would have persisted in one way or another with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Right. But the strategy that the Democrats had set out was they were going to diplomatically pull Iran away. Right. That eventually, and this fueled the anger of the Israelis, particularly Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Who would not stand for it, and that's why they did provocative bombings in order to, not to target. Look, the Iranians, their religious leaders, in their fatwa, it was considered immoral to create nuclear weapons. So, I mean, they might be closer now, but they're not. I mean, I've been hearing for literally 30 years about how Iran has a nuclear weapon.
Should we
Since
show
GY,
Netanyahu with the
yeah.
bomb poster?
Yeah, exactly. Such an idiot. So, anyways, um,
Does he have cancer now?
yeah, he had an operation.
Oh.
I'm sorry for the cancer, but so, anyways, so Obama's strategy was just a different strategy. Pull Russia away from Iran, so Iran eventually, will lose interest in. If the people become wealthier, they'll be less religious, and so on and so on. And
There'll be more feminism, more this and that.
right, right, because some of those things have already taken root there to begin with. I mean, I think Iran is the most unstable country within the three countries of Iran, Russia, and China.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
I'm glad you brought that up because it does return to one of the points that we were making last week, where Iran is, as you said, it is the weakest link, and to return to actually some of, ironically enough, the Obama era policy, it does look like a soft regime change attempt in Iran is going to be the way forward, because returning once again to Ukraine, if they can harm Russia's southern flank, that being Iran, both in terms of trade and
yeah,
security purposes, then they will have offset Ukraine, at least for the most part. And as a
yes,
secondary effect,
Yeah.
you cut off Iran from China, that cuts off a major energy source, and then once you lose Iran, once you have that regime change, if that were to happen, China would very quickly lose its influence in the Gulf states, and they would likely look back to Washington for leadership. In which case, you have undone about 10, 15 years of Chinese gains in the region, where I do think that it's not going to be maybe hard military power. There might be some strikes, there might be the targeted attacks, but I do think, to return to the issues that we brought up over the past couple weeks, particularly on the economic and social factors, you're going to see a push like no other, especially from the NGOs, from the State Department, from the CIA, whoever they can throw in there, in order to internally destabilize Iran. They somewhat have their foot in the door with somebody like Pezeshkian in power, because Pezeshkian came in promising all these social and economic reforms and also rapprochement with the West. So if they continue to press on that effort, press on that, you could very well see a situation in Iran develop very unfavorably for Russia and China. And to return to somebody I think we and our audience know very well, I was listening to some AA's perspective on this, and I know that he was speculating that a collapse in Iran within the next year isn't unlikely, and he
No.
was he was saying that a lot of Iranians have really lost steam on the Israel issue, where they're not necessarily rabid Zionists, they're not kissing Netanyahu's feet, but they don't see the Palestinian struggle as really worth their time and energy anymore. And that's not speaking for every Iranian, but that is speaking for a certain segment of the society, and that's on top of all the other social and economic pressures that have been mounting over the past several years, in which case it could create the perfect storm for Netanyahu, could create this perfect storm for the incoming administration under Trump, in order, maybe you don't need to bomb Iran into the Stone Age, but if they voluntarily give up at that point, you've won. You've offset Russia's southern flank. You've taken a major economic partner from China, and once again, you've also cut the
And you've
Chinese off from the Gulf.
isolated India.
Yeah, and isolated India on top of that, where while Russia's victory in Ukraine is vital for it, it would behoove Russia and China. Look, I know it might be a large ask to bail out an entire country, and I'm not even saying they would have to do that, but to beef up Iran's security. And we already see this. I mentioned this before. It's no coincidence that Putin and Pezeshkian are having a summit from January 17th to January 20th, where on the 20th they will sign security agreements. Okay, the day Trump comes into office, that's not a coincidence, which does lead me to believe that it's going to be the soft approach again, that they are going to capitalize on the recent instability in Iran over the past few years, and of course if we get Trump to return to maximum pressure, and we'll see what kind of diplomatic maneuvers him and his team can work in the Gulf states, because I know that Trump and the Saudis, which by extension the Emiratis, etc., things went back and forth. It was a rocky relationship, but he certainly had more command over them than, say, certainly Biden and also probably Obama at that point. So, depending on what American influence in the Gulf states look like, if they can get them to participate in quote-unquote maximum pressure, combined with, once again, glow-in-the-dark operations in Iran, we could see a very bad outcome.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. How would that... Because I'm looking at it from the perspective of, like, what they would do in, like, you know, this thing of ours, whatever you want to call it, fucking the dissident right, although that's a stupid term. But a lot of people would, like, cheer that. They're like, yeah, that's great. You know, America, we're, like, re-territorializing the Middle East. And, you know, who fucking cares about the war in Ukraine? And, you know, but at the same time, like, if that were to happen, the fall of Iran, that would lead to a lot of potential blowback and negative consequences for the region as a whole. And who knows what that would mean for China in terms of economic relations with the Western world. So I think, like, a lot of people would do, especially if Trump could, like, sign these people on to be like, yeah, rah, rah, who cares? You know, Iran is evil and whatever. I don't know, like, what would happen in terms of, like, the negative consequences of it. Or would it be that, like, you know, like, Turbo America's here forever and it's good, and, you know, all the third world BRIC nations will be fucked and it's good, you know. And so I don't know, like, it's, I don't think things are as simple. Yeah, like, no, but I don't think, like, things would be, like, that simple as to be like, okay, Iran is a huge chess piece in the BRIC nations. You will fuck over Russia and China by reasserting Israel's dominance over the whole of the Middle East. It's like, okay.
Well, I do want to clarify, and I don't think you were putting words in my mouth. I agree with everything you said.
No, I'm talking about you, concept. I'm just, like, I'm thinking from the perspective of, like, a huge swath of the dissident right.
Okay, but I do want to say, just to clarify with my previous point, I don't think it would be the death knell to, say, the alternative world order, if you will, BRICS, whatever.
Oh, no, like, China would still go on, Russia would still go on, especially if the war is still going on. You know, it would make things difficult. But same with India. India does not want to lose its trade partnership with China or Russia.
Even I do think one
not
big
that
question...
I care about what India wants, but I shouldn't say that. I do actually have immense respect for someone like Modi, who I do think is a world historical leader.
Look, I want India to do well so the diaspora feel called home. Let me just put it that way.
Exactly. I want them to send them the fuck back from here.
But
Go and help your own
Please
country.
go home.
but one
Yeah,
last point I'll
please.
make about Iran: if they do pursue the soft regime change strategy, assuming it works, I think the other big question is what kind of inroads could Russia and China make with a post-Islamic Republic of Iran government? Because I
Yeah.
don't think that's out of the question at all.
Well, because they would. I mean, really, the way that a globalized world works, as you two know, right? But I'm talking like for everybody. A lot of people that like, especially a lot of like libtards, and I hate to say it, a lot of people on the dissident right, they have this perception that it's kind of like, it's kind of like when I watched before the show, I was watching, I taped the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Philadelphia Flyers game. A lot of people basically view geopolitics as sports. It's like, if I get drafted to the Toronto Maple Leafs and I'm on like the first line with Austin Matthews, it's like, yeah, but then I'll get drafted to the Buffalo Sabres and then my loyalty will. No, it's just, listen, it doesn't work like football, okay? You're not going to get fucking drafted to the Miami Dolphins. This nation isn't going to get drafted to the Dallas, the Cowboys. So the way that geopolitics works is that obviously when it comes to regional rivals and competitive interests, a nation will secure for itself whatever it can get. Now, if you did have more of a secular regime in Iran, of course you would have basically a Western puppet. But that Western puppet
Yes.
isn't going to be, it's not like the fucking 70s or 80s where your puppet can be guaranteed to be loyal. Because the world doesn't work that way in a globalized economy. They're going to still cut deals with China and Russia and India. That's an inevitability. Because the Americans and the British and Canadians, when it comes to the Middle East, we can't, like the Israelis especially, they really can't provide for them a lot of things that the Iranians can't get elsewhere. You would have more of a pro-Western regime. You wouldn't have the Ayatollahs. And, the sort of vision of Khomeini would be erased. It wouldn't totally be erased from history, by the way, but it would be called into severe question. I mean, the way that the Ayatollahs are nowadays calls that vision into question because, frankly, I don't think these Ayatollahs can hold a fucking candle to Ayatollah Khomeini. But that being said, I don't think that you would have like a Mohammad Mossadegh or a Shah where it's like anything the Americans and the British and the Israelis want of them, they will do, up to and including sacrificing their economic relations with China and Russia and Toto.
I wonder if you
The
could
world
get.
doesn't work that way.
I wonder if you could get an IRGC junta in power. That might be
Maybe,
interesting.
maybe they'll get the Kurds in there. They'll be like the Janissaries.
Oh, that's frightening. I don't even want to talk about that. I don't want to
Yeah.
remember the Kurds exist. I don't
Well,
want to think about the
a lot
Kurds.
of there's a lot of Persian lesbians apparently in Iran,
Oh, of course.
and there's a lot of lesbians among the Kurds. So you'd have like, the survival of this like Sapphic Persian poetry. There was actually a lot of lesbian poets before radical Islam in Persia. People don't know this, but I know this because I'm a enjoyer of erotic poetry. You'd have like a whole like you'd have like they'd have like these cultural exchange things where you could send like Portland Antifa hipsters to Iran, and like you'd send like Iranian closeted lesbians over here. It'd be great, like yeah. No, but anyways, I'm joking. So, but like I think like it's not out of the question that obviously eventually there would be some kind of trade deal struck between a secular, more Western friendly Iran and particularly China. I don't really see the incentive for them to fully commit to any anti-Russian policy. But, it also depends on what happens with Israel too in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, Netanyahu is not going to be there forever.
Yes,
So,
and
yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because
A
even though
lot of people don't
Israel,
like Likud in Israel, by the way. Oh,
oh,
sorry, go ahead, Constant. Yeah,
even
that's my little.
even though
Yeah,
Israel has had a very um,
they have been stacking W's. Yeah,
yes, they've had a string of victories lately. I have gone over and I tried not to make it cope. I tried to be objective as possible, where Israel very well could be overstretching itself, and even assuming there's a neat little bow put on these conflicts, courtesy of Donald Trump and his team, we would see a lot of the return to the internal strife within Israel, because what was happening before October 7th, 2023, it was the dispute over the judicial reforms and
They're gonna put him in
Netanyahu's
jail. Yeah.
power grab, as many saw it. So while there are the external threats, it has created somewhat of unity, even though there still has been some dissent against Likud and the ruling
Yeah.
coalition. But once again, if that were to be put to rest, at least temporarily, if there were to be some sort of quote unquote feeling of peace, you could see a return to those sentiments coming up against Netanyahu, and then who would replace
Well,
him? Who would the next government be? And it would bring a lot of questions to the table that haven't been addressed in about a year. In which
yeah.
case, like I said, questions that were starting to look rather existential in terms of the direction of Israeli society.
There's a lot of factions within Israel that don't exactly like Likud, whether it be the libtards or like Russian Jews or recent immigrants, and certainly a lot of American diaspora Jews that are moving back to Israel because of any sort of like Bill Ackerman style neocon perceived threat to, especially younger ones. They won't exactly have loyalty to Netanyahu either unless they can be a part of some kind of like conservatism that bleeds in from like American shithead, Contard, Daily Wire type of stuff. But you do have like a significant degree of people in, especially Tel Aviv and places like that, who are more liberal, who don't exactly like what Likud is doing. And actually, when it comes to the diaspora, who are very uncomfortable with what's going on in Gaza. I mean, I shouldn't say, I mean, in terms of the diaspora, because there's a majority of Israeli society actually does have this very weird, not very weird, what am I talking about? They do have a very pro-war outlook when it comes to Gaza. They just don't feel the need to sign up and fight it for themselves. But when it comes to the sentiment towards what's happening, we all know the statistics, we all have seen it. But as Israel faces a lot of demographic problems, and as a lot of diaspora people move back to Israel, then maybe Likud won't exactly have a stranglehold over the judiciary, for example. And you'd have like more American educated liberal types from the diaspora moving back. So I think like the incentive wouldn't be there. And then this is all barring the fact of what's going to happen 4 years after Trump. If the Democrats can get their shit together, who knows what's going to happen, right? So it's all up in the air. Like people that do this horse trading shit, it's like it's kind of like the annexing Canada thing. It's sort of like, what are you fucking guys doing? Like it's just I don't know. I have this sort of like I have this like sort of skepticism towards any type of soothsaying. You can only logically extrapolate what's going to happen now, right? And who knows? Maybe Likud can survive. Maybe there will be a younger version of Netanyahu that will secure Israeli interests throughout the greater Middle East. But, I mean, it all just depends on what's going to happen this next 4 years, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Israel obviously is not going to destroy Iran.
No.
Right? And for Iran to be destroyed militarily, it would be very hard. But America would have to get involved. Remember that part of China's rise was because of America's strategic ambitions in the Middle East.
Yeah.
The billions and billions and billions of dollars that it spent in
during
Afghanistan.
GWOT, we just didn't care about China anymore. Yeah.
Right, right. Meanwhile, Russia, so China completely overcame the world and trade partners, and so now America, while it was busy doing shit for Israel, it's now in this position where like Trump is doing his little version of Fortress America by saying like obviously Trump has wanted to sanction Canada for quite some time, so it's nothing new. He wanted to buy Denmark. He's not going to buy Denmark, and there's lots of reasons for that. On the last show, I said, like uh, he oversells something in order to get like maybe access to resources, maybe to increase like nuclear powered icebreakers, right? Because they're way behind in the Russians. And there's areas where they might be able to interdict the Russians, but the Russians, like, they have their trade route with the Arctic, and like it doesn't infringe on anybody. So, getting Greenland in a way is getting closer to kind of to nowhere. Um, so in retrospect, I would think like there's probably resources in Greenland that he wants, and Greenland and Denmark aren't rich enough to extract them,
That is true. Yes,
uh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
right?
the vital resources you want in Greenland, and also to note, Greenland used to host, and I think might still host, the Thule Air Base, uh,
Oh
which
yeah.
which once again you need to consider that in terms of the Arctic Circle, in terms of missile flight paths, in terms of any sort of
Yeah,
aircraft overhead, when it comes to a standoff with Russia and to a lesser extent China, it is a much shorter path than say firing across the entire of the Atlantic. And also on that point, I know that we touched on icebreakers, the Russian control over the Arctic. I will reiterate what I had said before. I don't think that Trump actually wants to make Canada the 51st state, or even necessarily wants to buy Greenland, but
Yeah.
there is a reason him or the regime using him as a mouthpiece are pushing for further integration of North America. And I don't
yeah.
want to say I'm concerned just yet, but I do think it makes me uneasy. I'll put it that way.
It's
Because
bringing up all the 2000s conspiracy movement stuff about the North American Union. you know,
Alex
the,
Jones is right again. The Amero.
yeah, the documentary United We Fall with Luke Rudowski. Yeah. Oh man, people remember that, eh? But like, you gotta be an
They
old
do.
head to remember this shit, you know. But
but no, I'm glad you brought that up. But it
Yeah.
does, like I said, all of this does strike me as odd. However, I do have one explanation I can think of as to why Trump's making this push, particularly for Canada. So we all know about his
Mhm.
stance on the H-1B visa and how
oh,
controversial it's
okay, yeah,
been,
there
and
you go.
we will get into that. Okay, we'll
Hey,
get
can
into
I?
that later. But for starters, I want to say I think Trump just wants to poach all of that immigrant talent from Canada.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Trump is going to get his Indians one way or another.
Oh, well, really, I think a lot of it, I think, is because he's correctly intuiting that Polyev is going to form the next government. And so he would rather play ball with the conservative administration the way that Ronnie Reagan would rather play ball with Brian Mulroney than, Trudeau Sr., stepfather Sr. So I think like that's probably what his mindset is, which is a good deal because, Canadian conservatives, as you alluded to last week, Goran, um, I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to bash them too hard, but like, they kind of do have this, and a lot of, okay, here's the thing. I did a very great millennial this year. I did the Canadian panel. It was me. I'm forgetting certain people, but it was me, David Serini, Endeavor, Fortinax, and a few other people. And, I highly recommend you going to Millennial Woes' channel
Mhm.
and watching it because we really lay
Yeah.
out a lot of different theories as to like what Trump's motivation would be, and also the relation between the quote unquote right wing in Canada, which does not really exist besides, rebel media or like, a few wignats here and there. But in terms of the greater conservatard media that has, first the first PSYOP, of course, as much as I appreciate and admire him as a writer, the first PSYOP was Hollinger and Conrad Black, uh, creating the National Post. Then the second one was, of course, the work by people like Mark Steyn and Ezra Levant. As much as I will always say that when I was 13 years old, Mark Steyn did deliver me my first red pill when I
Yeah.
read America Alone. But when it comes to the sort of like the shape of Canadian conservatism, when it comes to Stephen Harper's work in the Citizens Coalition when he was like in his early 20s, a lot of it is sort of structured around a huge absence of what that term Canadian conservatism or the right wing in Canada meant before Pierre Trudeau. A lot of it is basically just America Light. And a lot of
Yeah.
Canadian conservatives, even the truckers, as much as I love them, they did have this, and they continue to have this like flowery view of conservatism in America, because a lot of the older guys, they watch Fox News, and they, and then of course Ezra Levant was busy in the 2010s shoveling e-celebs from Canada and Britain into America. So, this is the problem when it comes to what's happening now in the States, where you have half of the people, or more than half, saying that, yeah, that's great. I love America. Let's be American. We're going to have the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, and we're not going to be like libtard cucks anymore. But then you do have people who are serious, kind of like Fortinax, who are seriously questioning it and saying like, okay, why is this a rhetorical point besides haha la funny meme? And is it a way for Canadians conservatives, whoever they are, to be psyoped into this like North American Union shit? Because a lot of it, of course, you have like this inorganic nature, this inauthentic nature to what constitutes Canadian conservatism in the 20th and 21st century, right? So this is all like, I'm not saying like Trump has this grand intention of annexing Canada. I think it's more to just preempt a conservative administration on Parliament Hill and to like play ball with them, which would happen anyways, because the conservative base in Canada certainly is pro, at least tacitly pro-Trump or pro-American, because of by virtue of how libtarded Canada is. So, but at the same time, a lot of like right wingers in America that are taking this seriously and having like this game plan over it, it's like, well, I don't know, like, it's not that it makes me uncomfortable. Well, who am I saying? Like, it makes me a bit uncomfortable, because it's like, I understand where they're coming from, especially like it's ingrained within the American psyche, the manifest destiny thing. But I just think that geopolitically, it's impossible unless like Canada faces a catastrophic economic collapse, which, I mean, let's face it, is another realm of possibility. Or B, merely geographically expanding America wouldn't really serve them any benefit.
Why? So America could get more liberals? Like,
yeah,
there's
get more Democrats.
there's like a dozen states that are just as liberal as Canada. Like, I don't know, what is this distorted view of America by Americans?
He wants to be able to
Like,
say we're larger than Russia.
It's really dumb.
So,
I mean, I've
replied
said
to
it on
me-
the show
Yeah, go ahead.
before, but basically, like, when you're so used to losing, stuff like we're going to annex Canada makes you feel like you're winning, but your situation is no different. You haven't moved the needle anywhere, or unless you have two really important values. One of them is less migration and keeping the American identity going, the European part, or we just like annexing stuff. And like, when you do that, like, really, you're just saying, well, yeah, both matter, but in the end, I'll take annexing. I've seen a lot of this, and it doesn't surprise me.
Do you want our Indians? Do you
Yeah.
want our Sikhs? Yeah, go ahead, Gore.
It doesn't surprise me at all. I see this with like a lot of different Westoid right wingers in Europe and in America. It's a momentary relief from despair.
Yeah.
Like,
because Canada's in a vastly weaker position than America, obviously.
Why would it, like, America already has a good position. Like, all this is, and he does this a lot, right? He's going to say stuff that he knows his base is going to go like nuts for.
Yeah.
And then the betrayal will happen.
Yeah.
Right. He's done this before. Remember with like, oh, he's going to deport all these people. And then he's like, in his last year, he's talking about naturalizing the dreamers. Like, I don't know how people didn't learn from 2020. Like, yeah, I know he didn't get the kind of resistance, but like, he's a known commodity now. And, I mean, look, both the Democrats and the Republicans, like, Biden is diametrically way off, not even close to Obama, even though Obama, like every other president that preceded him, was pro-Israel.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if it was a Republican that did what Biden did, I mean, he would be considered a war criminal. You'd never hear the end of it because it would be a Republican who did it,
Yeah.
right? And that the media did not do this
Giving arms
tells
shipments to Israel where they're
yeah,
genociding the Palestinians. Yeah.
yeah. And the fact that the media didn't do this tells you exactly about where the direction of things are going, and how the Democrat Party, in the way that the Republican Party became more like Democrats and the Democrat Party became more like Republicans in the 90s. I know there's all these cultural differences that arose after the 2000s, but like on many fundamental issues that used to separate them in the 70s and 80s, like those are gone. So it tells you in a way that the kind of desperation that the US is in. um I just I just don't think, like, he's not going to buy these countries. He's not going to take them over. He wants to get one over Trudeau, and I don't care. Like I don't
Or
care
Mark
about.
Carney. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I don't care about this gay country or America. Like, to me, they're both gay. I don't care. Like,
I mean, we have a chance as Canadians to not be gay. That's what me and Fortnex are actually talking about. But yeah, go
how?
ahead.
You're next to America.
Yeah. Oh, fuck. You know.
Well, I mean, what you
Yeah,
see.
George Grant was right about everything. You know.
I mean, it's the ideology. Like, yeah, you're going to put some of the woke away. I get it, right? Because the West, and that's really why it was so important to talk about Obama versus Biden and Trump now. And techno-globalists and Zionists, but eventually the West/America came to the point where they had to decide whether they were going to still keep going. I mean, there are elements of global homo that are perennial in Western thought. They're not going to go away. Okay. You're not going to get the 90s. You're certainly not going to get the 50s. Okay. So just put it out of your mind. Remember when this war in Russia started, I said that Putin isn't base, but like, when are you going to catch up to him? Right.
Mhm.
Back then I said, I dare you to get or to outlaw gay pride parades. You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. Okay. Like, I'll give you something small instead of going after gay adoption or gay marriage. Like, please
Or
get real
Trant.
with
Well,
this.
yeah, or
Yeah,
even.
please get real with yourselves. Okay. Um, so anyways, I don't see like fundamental differences. The like, it's like you could talk about Europe and compare it to America, right? The reason why Poland is allowed to be a little bit based, and some of the Baltic countries, is they're a bulwark against Russia,
Yeah, they hate Russia.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to nurture that. I mean, and along the way, you also have to infiltrate them with more gay stuff, like the opening up of the gay museum in Warsaw. Uh,
Yes, and we're
Oh,
already seeing
uh,
base Poland and the base
yeah,
Baltic states falling apart. I mean, look at Tusk, look at his first year in
yeah,
power, and just
yeah, yeah,
what sweeping changes they've made.
right. And so, okay, so that has to still be there, right? Like that, because it's fundamental that their population does not have any fixed, like, strong fixed ethnic identity. The reason why there are parts of America that are more like Poland is because they need them to be in the military, right? I mean, the reason that's not the case in America is because we don't have a real military.
you
But
mean in Canada?
it's, yes, in Canada, yes,
Yeah.
right. That's the only reason. It's like, it's not. This isn't complicated.
Which is a shame because we had like the fourth most powerful military in the world after World War II,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like the Canadian troops were like 10 times crazier, more had more gumption than even American troops. So
Like,
like,
just
yeah,
really try it as a thought exercise, right? Imagine things went like a little bit differently. Let's say with the sexual revolution.
yeah.
Imagine it didn't happen in Canada,
Oh
and
fuck.
Canada was still like 95% white. Because when my family moved here, it was certainly 95% white.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, like, imagine if that continued and they didn't budge, right? And they became like conservative, they remained conservative, strong ties to Britain. Britain didn't go. Imagine if that, like, America wouldn't
Imagine if Blairism didn't
America
happen.
wouldn't
Yeah.
wouldn't America wouldn't tolerate that, right? Because like the changes that people want to see happen would like it would be such a fundamentally different West, right? And the West depends on not having this identity, right? Because it would create division, right? Right? They don't want that to happen. The only time where there's some allowable stuff, some things that are based that are allowed, is when they have an adversary, like, and that's it, right? Like I say, the reason why there are red states, and like frankly, like all these red states, like 25 years ago would have been blue states in terms of like their laws.
The Southern
And
Strategy, Huey Long, yeah, yeah.
yeah, like big deal. Like, so all I'm saying is um uh, anyways, I'm just rambling,
Well, there's
sorry.
huge pockets of cities in these red states that are blue because of certain populations that live there.
Yeah.
But another person that replied to me where I said, like, listen, guys, I don't think this is serious, so why are you paying attention to it? There's like a lot of geopolitical problems. He said, well, because Canada's a national security threat because of our immigration bullshit and because of
Oh,
we could
give me
deny
a
them
break.
resources.
Canada.
I know, but I said, like, listen, number one, America could just build a wall or have more border agents. Because, the Canadian border with America is one of the largest borders in the world. I understand. But when it comes to the economic problems of like Canada somehow having the gumption of denying America anything, I said, well, listen, man, if you look at the history of any economic relationship between Canada and America, who always wins? America.
Yeah.
There's
I
the
mean, it started in
incentive.
the 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody in
Softwood
my
lumber.
generation saw just how much Americans bought up, how many Canadian businesses were bought up in the 90s and early
Yeah.
2000s. Like, that
Tech
process just goes
companies.
on and on. Like,
Yeah.
everybody, oh, China. Like, I mean, I know some people in my church that went on about that. I go, why are you afraid of China? Like, if America says this is what we're going to do with China, Canada will follow.
Yeah.
Like,
No, but also
like
economically, the
all that
incentive.
all that stupid brain dead stuff about Canada becoming like communist. Oh my God, it's just, I'm sorry, but like
We're the
conservatives
most
just,
neoliberal country in the world.
I know they just swallowed this like this conservative slop like you wouldn't believe. They don't think things through, honestly.
Because
And
people like Ezra Levant, they like, okay, I have a complicated relationship here because I understand that like there's a bunch of people that are libtards that are like pro Trudeau. There's this one fucking guy. I'm not going to mention his name. He's like this pretend glowy that has these elaborate conspiracy theories. I'll tell you about it in private.
okay.
But these people, they think there's like some right-wing dark money that's subverting Canada and Britain. And it's like all this bullshit, right? Like, but here's the thing. When it comes to things like the trucker protest, right? There's obviously an incentive for American right-wingers to boost what was happening, not just for their own optics, but also because a lot of us, a lot of them have friends in Canada. A lot of influencers always go to Canada when it comes to the political right. Like most of my audience is Canadian, as American. But when it comes to organically in Canada, people like Ezra Levant that go on Fox News, for instance,
Yeah.
then you have this reciprocal relationship to where they buy into this, like, this sort of like contard, like they're cultural Marxists here in Canada. And yeah, okay, they are like, there's huge swaths of the Canadian government that are like commies and, the worst people imaginable. But I do think that Americans as a whole kind of do get this like normative picture that is ultimately influenced on the left and right by American politics. Because
Oh
blue
yeah.
state, yeah, because like libtards in Canada, they're basically just spiritual Democrats, right? They get all their talking points. They try to LARP as Democrats. My theory with the whole mass graves thing is was essentially Canadian libtards trying to like mimic their own Summer of Floyd, only with Indigenous people.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to
Canada's
economic,
already a 51st state. I don't know
yeah,
like what.
no, but this guy, he he's a follower of mine. I don't want to bash him, but like, he's like, well, what about the economic things? What if Canada denies us resources? I go, listen.
Oh God.
The history not just the history of economic relations between Canada and America, but the incentive for the Canadian managerial state to cooperate economically with America is too great. Now, we can ship lumber to China, but that's compared to the cutting of costs of making pipelines and roads and truck travel. All those things are designed to facilitate trade between Canada and America. That's not going away anytime soon. And if there was a world war, America would just nationalize the resources anyways. You know,
Right.
so it's like America will get anything it wants from Canadians.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that this is the case is because, Britain is no longer great.
Yeah, Britain's even more, in some ways, worse.
Britain already recognized this ages ago, right? And we've brought it up on the show that Britain wanted to reduce the development of Canada because it knew that the more development that occurred in Canada, the more economic and cultural ties between it and America would increase.
They didn't want to repeat
and
the
that's
same
exactly what happened. And after World War II, basically they knew the gig was up, and that's inevitably the way things would go. And so, Britain is a very willing partner. Also, this idea that Trump is going to introduce tariffs on the British. He's not going to do that.
No.
I mean, these two countries really are joined at the hip, right? They can, especially at this time, there cannot be any kind of division. And like I say, be really careful, because somewhere along the way in the next few months, there's a very good likelihood Trump is going to do like a major betrayal. And it could be for the whole H-1 whatever visas, which incidentally are not about, like, they're not skilled labor. It's low and medium labor, not highly skilled. And so they're trying to whip up a lot of 2016 sentiments, but it's I mean, 2016 is over.
They're skin suiting it. There's no other way to put it.
What's that?
They're skin suiting it.
They're skin suiting it. Yes,
it is a mockery.
Absolutely.
It is a parody of what it was in 2016. Look, I know that
absolutely
2016 wasn't this ideal time, but whatever real energy existed there, like I said, it's just a mockery. It's a parody. Is all that's left.
I sent you a graph about India.
Oh boy, let's pull that one up.
Oh.
So if this was really 2016,
is this the cousin marriage rate graph?
No. It's...
Oh.
Might be better, might be worse, depending on your point of view. Hold on, let's just say sanitation standards are called in question.
If this is Trump in 2016, he would be saying the Indians are coming here to take our toilets. It would be that kind of a thing. But that Trump is gone.
Yeah.
I don't know if have you put up the graph yet?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, that will make sense. So, anyways, yeah. I mean, what
oh God!
Yeah, they're coming here for our
India
toilets.
Has 2 spots there.
Yeah. No, but the funny thing about this graph is I saw this on a TED Talk. It was an Indian woman who talked. So I screen capped this from.
Oh man.
I disavow this far right extremism. I'm disgusted.
Yeah. So I hope people understand, right? America cannot tolerate in its region an ethno state outside of its borders, right?
Yeah.
It can't tolerate that.
No, this is traditional imperial politics, where you do implant a foreign population in order to destabilize any regions that might act up. We saw the British do this time and time again. Ironically enough, the British love doing this with Indians. They put them in South Africa, they put them in Fiji, all over the place. You had Indian laborers across the British Empire.
Yeah. So that's the thing, that
Mahatma Gandhi was an Indian lawyer in South Africa.
Yes.
Hear what he said about the Africans.
Oh yes, I know.
Yeah.
Well, I always appreciate the first 10 minutes of the Gandhi movie, because as this very comical scene where they botched his assassination, which then they immediately flash back to him getting thrown off the train, It's some of the most comedic bits of cinema I've ever seen that weren't supposed to be comedic.
Yeah, Ben Kingsley did a good job there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
I hope people can understand that America has no need of that kind of a Canada, and then it would feel threatened. But one of the crucial mistakes that people
There's
do now,
no
I can,
benefit for them annexing us. They would just get an army of libtards to vote Democrat.
yeah,
The Western
exactly,
states do not have the population to offset the amount of libtards in
yeah,
British Columbia, Ontario, and even Quebec.
yeah.
So, oh, sorry, I cut you off, Gordon. Yeah,
Yeah, like 80% of Canadians live below the 49th parallel.
yeah,
Like there are more Americans who live um, in that area overlapping southern Ontario
yeah,
than Canadians. Okay,
yeah.
anyway, so
Buffalo, Pennsylvania. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So it makes no sense. He's up to something. It's not just trolling. I would say it's more than that.
hmm.
He wants certain deals. If there's a conservative MP, it'll be pipelines,
Yeah.
right? It'll be something like
It'll
that.
be
It'll
the
be like,
keystone that
oh,
Biden
we're going to
got.
put more
Yeah.
submarines in the Arctic because there's those damn Ruskies are there. It'll be something like that, and but it's not going to be that they're a lot. Like I can forgive like normie conservatives that who will say something like they will pretend that a country has more sovereignty than it does. Or they're
Yeah.
not pretending, they actually believe it. But when it's somebody who's on the net and they make bad faith arguments about, Canada, what if Canada did this? It's a bad faith argument. This person knows that Canada doesn't have that kind of sovereignty.
Yeah.
They just don't have it. And he knows they don't have it. He wants to create this illusionary world where all these countries, I mean, look what America did to Europe. Like it literally ruined their economy. It destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines. And it's not because they were losing, it's because Europe was benefiting. Okay. Um, Ukraine shuts off the gas and suddenly it's Russia's fault, but Ukraine shut it off.
Well, I'm glad you
Like,
brought that up because that does bring me back to a point in a graphic that we presented last episode, which is this vertical gas corridor where they're going to ship in the gas through Greece and then to the rest of Central and Eastern Europe. Where I think a large part of this now, America has a very large natural gas sector in its own right, but if it can once again lean on the Canadians for increased resources, to repeat what I had said last week,
We have a lot of
that's
LNG here. Yeah.
that's all the more leverage they have over Europe in order to quote unquote decouple them from Russia. In which case, I do think a large part of this, on top of the Arctic coastline, does loop back around, particularly to the energy resources, so they can continue to use them to browbeat the Europeans.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Um, so I mean, and what did the Europeans do? Nothing. They literally pretended that they couldn't figure out who did it, and said it was this little ship with like 6 Ukrainians on board. Like that's what they want, but we
Volodymyr
can't
Z
find them.
did it.
Yeah.
Like they have
Mm.
like was that Mission Impossible or was that James Bond? I forget.
Yeah, it's escaping me, but
Yeah.
I know what you're going for.
Yeah. Yeah. They were like elite forces, they were like
Five
yeah.
men, one woman, led by one woman. I said one woman. Led by Volodymyr Z on a Danish yacht was the official story, I believe. Uh,
Yeah.
quite a team of scuba divers. What else can I say? It wasn't a joint operation between the Americans, the potentially the British, and the SBU. No, it was just some scuba enthusiasts who took a wrong turn. What what else can I say? And as you had pointed out, the Germans had no reaction. Many Europeans cheered on. Let's not forget that Sikorsky, even before he assumed office as the foreign minister, was very quick to celebrate it. He might as well be the wife in that arrangement. Husband of Van Alphenbaum, the notorious American neoconservative. So once again, these things are all linked back in this is Atlanticist behemoth, it all loops back around now, doesn't it? And to touch on, I wanted to let you guys really have the floor on that because you're speaking from the Canadian perspective. You guys live up north. I can only say so much living in the core of the empire. But I completely agree with everything you said. It is red meat to the base. It is this bloviating at a time when there's far more pressing issues. I and it's not even entertaining in the way that it would have been in 2016 because, like I said, there was still um, some energy behind it, as it were. But this is just, it, rhetorically speaking, even by Trump standards, and I know that I have given Trump a lot of passes. It's bizarre even by his standards. And like I said, this is probably just hardline negotiations, but it is duping a lot of otherwise very intelligent people who should know better because they're
Yeah.
playing into their base emotions. They're thinking, oh, this is going to be cool. It's going to be the first time we've added territory to the United States since the early 1900s, since we won the Spanish-American War. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be a great morale boost going into our 250th anniversary as a country to add on all this territory? But like I said, it's all just red meat to the base in a very bizarre fashion. But
Yeah.
one of these
Yeah.
territorial acquisitions I take more seriously than the other two is the question of the Panama Canal.
Oh yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Because I do think there is some serious discussion there. And with that, like I said, I'm not too well read in the treaties, but I know during the transfer of the canal, there were caveats under which the Americans maintained certain control. But who are we kidding? It's completely run by the American Navy. There's no question that the Panamanians even control the canal. But once again, that returns to the question: why is Trump, or at least who Trump is speaking for, so eager to solidify direct American control over the canal? Why are they wanting to get rid of the pretenses? What are they preparing for? Because the example I always go back to, maybe it's not the best comparison, maybe it's not a one for one, is we saw within less than a year, 6 months out of getting out of Afghanistan, the Ukraine war was the primary focus of the American empire. And whenever they make these kind of drastic moves, you notice that it almost always immediately precedes something much larger. So once again,
Mm-hmm,
what are they
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
anticipating? And I don't even want to. Okay, maybe I do kind of want to go down the NWO route, but not right now. I'd love to do that sometime. But what are they anticipating in that regard? Why do they feel such an urgent need to create Fortress North America? What are they expecting? Are they expecting a major fallout with Europe? I have a hard time believing that.
China.
China.
I have a hard time believing that, given how much the Atlanticists have a stranglehold over pretty much every political institution in Europe. Perhaps it could
Yeah.
be China anticipating some sort of greater conflict in the Asia Pacific. But once again, I'll return to my point, and we'll see how successful it is. I do think that Trump's position towards the Chinese, especially with his relationship with Xi Jinping, is going to be some sort of attempt at detente and some degree of reconciliation, at least temporarily, and that the foreign policy focus is going to be on Iran. And perhaps that a large part of this is just to gin up some national pride going into
Yeah,
our next potential
Yeah.
conflict. And I do think
absolutely.
that's a major reason from it. I would say it's probably I would still say it's a secondary reason, but it does make me concerned that they are expecting something much larger if they are that
Mm-hmm.
eager to
Well,
really lock down the home base, as it were.
the Chinese have incentive towards the Panama Canal as well, so maybe it's just a bargaining chip. Like it's a way of like reifying their own strength to be like, okay, now we control the Panama Canal. The Chinese are gonna have to deal with us more explicitly, and so maybe it's just like that's the goal. I mean, who knows?
That's what makes the most sense. But like I said, I think out of all of Trump's fantasies of expansion, the Panama Canal is the one that probably has the most weight behind it. And I think,
I mean,
Yeah,
I can see it as a choke point. Like, we talked about on the last show that the Chinese have opened up like the largest port in South America.
yeah,
I think it's in Chile. And so, like, obviously the Chinese did it, and maybe one of the reasons why they did it is because they expect Trump to do something like this. Or Trump is catching up. Maybe he's doing it in retaliation. But I think they see the bigger picture, and that America's going to looks at the Panama Canal as a kind of a choke point, right? And I think something like 67 or more percent of all ships who pass through are American ships.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
the vast majority are not like they're not like from all over the world. Like at least 2/3 or more are American.
Yes, it's
So
predominantly North American traffic, and of that, it's mostly from the United States.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, he's going to affect like this 32, 30, 32, 31% that like who I mean, what country is so dependent on using the Panama Canal? Um, I mean, there probably is,
I
right?
mean, do the
So,
Venezuelans use the canal to ship oil to
yeah,
China?
I was thinking the exact same thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I'll admit it's Latin America is not one of my it's one of my blind spots when it comes to doing this. Not that I know nothing, but it does get often neglected because of how much else is going on in the world, especially in Europe, the Middle East, and the Asia Pacific. It does tend to fall to the wayside, at least in terms of what I pay attention to. But I could see that if the Panamanians, and I'm not sure of their exact relations with the Venezuelans, which I can't imagine they're too bad. But if they do let
Yeah,
Venezuelan cargo ships through the canal, particularly for trade into the Asia Pacific, I could see that being a point of contention where the Americans want further control over the canal so they can curtail or outright deny countries like Venezuela and maybe other sympathetic countries on the South American continent to their economic ties with China, particularly in the Pacific region. So that's probably the uh, most logical explanation I can think of for something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I think you really hit it on the nail, Constantine. Like if he's even half serious, it's about some kind of repercussions that are coming why he would want to do this. The other explanation is there's lots of resources. America needs them. They're going to cut deals with these countries. They're not going to take. Of course, he has to threaten. I'm going to take over, and then of course it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, you
And
come
and,
into a
and then 6 months later, some kind of a trade deal and a resource extraction deal is signed, and he doesn't look too badly off. I mean, it is kind of the way he works, right? So
yeah, Trump comes in with the bloviating offer, but he walks away with mining rights in Greenland and Canada.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
a win for the American empire. That's a win for his base. He can talk about our economic expansion. He can talk about our economic
And didn't
partnership and what a great
yeah,
deal maker he is.
and didn't Biden cancel the pipeline deal that we had with the U.S.? Didn't Biden just nix that in the
Yes,
That was
first
the
year?
first
Biden
thing he did, the
He
Nord
did.
Stream, the
Keystone.
Keystone, yeah.
Keystone. Yeah, I would. I know he desperately wants that pipeline. I mean, I can see that from like a strategic point of view why that's a
Yeah.
good deal. Like, I mean, Biden represents this other power center that it too has become more Zionist, but it has had to in order to survive. Because if anybody has dirt, it's Biden and his son.
Oh
So
yeah.
he better support Israel or else, you know. But like you say, if it was a Republican, and a lot of Republicans with much less dirt would have given even double, which would have broken records, even though Biden himself broke records. But if it was a Republican, you know what would have happened. So in
Well,
a way, it
clearly
worked
Trump would have
out.
prevented it. It would have never happened at all under Trump, as we know.
Yeah, yeah,
Because the Iranians, there was maximum pressure, and uh, once again all the stuff that he says. But yeah, I completely agree that especially when it comes to the question of Zionism, when it comes to the question of Israeli influence, that yeah, a lot of the, I guess you could say, Brzezinskiite core of American foreign policy, particularly on the Democratic side, has had to make a number of concessions to Israel for a number of different reasons, and that has it has really forced themselves to shoot them in the foot because Biden
yeah,
forced to bail out Israel. I mean, I know that the 2023 counteroffensive is what really set the Ukrainians back, but once again, you had them coming off this failed counteroffensive with aid earmarked for Ukraine being immediately diverted to Israel. I can only imagine what a um, stall that put into the Ukrainian war effort and how much that probably screwed it over. I'm not saying it would have saved the day or anything, but Ukraine might be in a much better position today had either A, October 7th not happened at all, or B, had the Americans been a bit more measured with their support for Israel in response to that, and had said that Ukraine is the primary objective, has said that quote unquote defeating the Russians is what we need to focus on. If they would have told the Israelis to more or less pound sand after October 7th, you're a rich country doing it on your own. Who knows what the front lines in Ukraine would look like today?
Yeah.
If it was Obama, he probably would have been more tactful when it came to Israel. I hate to give Obama anything, but Biden had to like bend the knee for obvious reasons. So yeah, Ukraine saw, and of course, like at the key moment where they were contemplating the Kursk offensive as well is another. It's like this happens right when you're invading a part of Russia. It's like, oh shit, like it was really not advantageous for them. And the fact that
Yeah.
Russia's consolidating gains on the front line, I mean, well, But then again,
Yeah,
what more can America
I think
give them?
cities like Pokrovsk are going to fall in the next few months.
Yeah.
I have no doubt about that. And Turetsk is going to fall by the weekend. These are important places. They were for Ukraine. I thought all of this was Ukraine. Um,
They're so
and like I say,
symbolic that the Ukrainians have only fortified them since 2014.
yes, that's right. Yeah, exactly. 10 years of fortifications. Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, well, unless Trump is serious about what he pronounced, I think a few months ago now, that more or less, if the Europeans want to fund Ukraine, they can do it. It's like, okay, if you want to like have your anti-Russian, your like ethnic hatred, especially the British, then they could like do whatever they want. Okay, fine, whatever. But I don't know. Like, I mean, America, I don't think, contrary to what like some American nationalists think that are sympathetic to Russia, they're going to turn off the spigot like the second Trump gets involved. JD Vance is a zigger, and it's like, it's like, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. Like, they're still going to have to at least nominally fund Ukraine to an extent throughout, I would say, summer 2025.
Oh, of course, and they've already had the quote-unquote Trump-proof packages put in place in order to make sure that happens. And on another point, when it comes to Trump's peace plan towards Ukraine, look at the guy who he put in charge of that.
It's not serious.
Kellogg. And once again, we see Trump's negotiating tactic, which is no surprise from him, is he's going to bring in all the tough guys, he's going to scare the Russians at the bargaining table, and then we can discuss real terms. Now, full disclosure, I do not believe it's going to happen even for a second, but that is the rationale of Trump's team going into this. He's going to bring in all the hawks, and he's going to surround himself with the scary guys, and then he's going to play good cop, bad cop, and then he'll let the Russians save face, and they'll call it a day. Which is what I think he wants to do. That's what I think his objective will be. But once again, he's going to find himself in a position where the Russians, who say, yes, we're conciliatory towards negotiations, probably just for optic reasons at this point, so they can say, well, at least we tried. Similar to their meeting with Biden in January 2022, right as the Kazakhstan failed color revolution was happening, where they can say, well, at least we tried to talk this out, but we had no force to take up arms. The Russians, they will have the momentum on the front line. Barring some miracle on the Ukrainian side, that momentum will continue. We will see, as you said, key towns like Pokrovsk fall in the next few months here, and the Russians will be able to continue to press the advantage, and that will make the Americans, and by lesser extent the Europeans, who might be at least ideologically more dedicated to this, think Poland, the Baltic states, the British, even to some extent the French and Germans, but like I said, there's a bit of a question mark as far as that's concerned, but I'll leave that to the side for a moment. But moving into that, there will be pressure for the Americans, or the collective West, as it were, to draft up a deal that lets them save face, that says, oh, well, Ukraine didn't get it that bad. We managed to repel the Russian invasion. Sure, the Russians might occupy 25% of the country, but we don't recognize it's still officially Ukraine. Blah, 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 blah. And they can say, oh, we can call it a day, the war's over. But as it continues now, if Trump wants to take the position that it looks like he's going to take with somebody like Kellogg and some of the other people he has appointed to Ukraine, it's going to be a slow burn, and the Russians are going to continue to make gains. And eventually, Ukraine will lose because of that, because the Russians are not going to settle for anything less than stated neutrality and the dropping of the NATO question as far as the West is concerned.
Yeah.
And nobody in the West, even Trump, is saying, oh, we can put a 10-year moratorium, a 20-year moratorium. Nobody is willing to just say, no Ukraine in NATO, buffer zone, neutral country. It's just beyond the pale to even bring that up in negotiations. Of course, the Ukrainians will never accede to that.
Because Dana
Zelensky never
Applebaum will
will.
call you a Russian collaborator.
Oh,
That's why.
if she keeps calling me that, I'm gonna burst out in tears crying.
Yeah.
But with that being said, it, it's just at an impasse. And realistically, the best thing America could do if we had a rational foreign policy, assuming we still blunder ourselves in the first place, but the next best thing we can do is we can cut our losses and work we can work out the territory and we can work out the alignment of Ukraine and we can lick our wounds. We can recover from it. But at the rate at which things continue, if we get a departure of the Kiev regime, which is not unlikely at this point,
Oh yeah.
a complete implosion of the Ukrainian government, implosion of the Ukrainian front lines, then Russia is going to be able to dictate peace terms, irrelevant of what the West thinks. They can have them. They can have BRICS. They can say we're organizing elections here, and I don't know. Maybe their preferred candidate will just so happen to win those elections. We'll reopen the pipelines. The Ukrainians will receive only modest transit fees compared to what they had before. They'll allow us use of Ukrainian ports. We might not annex Odessa. We're still going to have access to it. They're going to respect Russian language rights. They're going to smooth over the situation with the church and the canonical status of the church that is still in communion with Moscow versus the weird breakaway State Department church. Once again, they're going to be able to, at that point, to dictate terms, and they could also enforce the quote-unquote denazification, where these Galician nationalists who want to at least rhetorically control the country are going to be politically marginalized, and I think frankly, the world will be better for it. And you could say, oh, that's unprincipled. Why aren't you supporting nationalists in other countries? Well, no, number one, I don't care what these Galician nationalists who have been parroting the same thing for 150 years have been saying. I do not care about these backwater, schizophrenic conspiracy theorists. That's really what they are in
Yeah.
in these parts of
Yeah.
Western Ukraine.
The-
Yeah, hell, I would be happy. Just give it back to Poland. Let the Poles have Galicia back. Let them repopulate it as it was stolen from them. And you know what? That can be the NATO compromise. Okay, the Poles can have their former holdings that Ukraine now controls back, and the Russians can draw up their buffer state, and that's the peace plan there. Okay, that's how NATO saves face. Transcarpathia to Hungary. All of that. But once again, and not that that's really going to happen. Maybe I don't know, maybe Transcarpathia, Hungary, or maybe we do get some sort of Western quote unquote peacekeeping forces in a Kosovo-style situation at the most in parts of Western Ukraine, which could be dangerous in its own right. But once
Yeah.
again, if this does continue, if the West doesn't decide to cut its losses, the Russians are going to dictate terms for
Well,
how
I
this
agree with
war
what you're
ends.
saying because, like, who has the real right to nationalism? The Polish in Galicia or the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian far right? Now, what would complicate things is if the Ukrainian far right managed to depose Zelensky and the Kiev regime. That would complicate things, but yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if I'm so optimistic. I would say like the plan for the West is to keep this war going as long as possible with
oh,
the
Yeah.
I
threat
agree,
that
but
that Ukraine. Okay, sorry. Then
yeah, I agree. But my question is, what does as long as possible even look like at this point?
Few
right
years.
now it would be a lot of money. And I said when this war started, or even before it started, I said it would be advantageous for Russia if they could make this war an economic black hole for the West. That it just now when it starts to affect people's lives in Europe in a dramatic way, they will want funding of Ukraine to stop.
Well, I am curious on that note where the German elections will go because you do have the AfD. I hope I pronounced that right for any Germans out there. Uh, that is, I mean, they're not leading in the polls; they're doing decent. I know that the CDU, CSU, I think it's Merz, who is the party leader for them, is he's party line on Ukraine. The Soc Dems, the Social Democrats, they're not getting back in the power. Who are we kidding ourselves?
No.
The parliamentary situation in France is interesting, where you do have the populist insurgency. Austria is another one of those countries where you had actually a convergence to the left and the right, similar to what you saw in Slovakia, where coalition potential does exist between these. So if you get these major players in the European Union that continue to have these more renegade governments, assuming they actually are able to get in power and assert themselves, say similar to what they've done in Hungary and Slovakia, big ask, I know, but just for the sake of argument, play along, please. Uh, what will that do to the situation in Ukraine, where a lot of these parties that have talked about working towards some sort of peace arrangement? And I think that's another big question, especially with the German elections coming up and with how volatile European politics really is, where coalitions can fall apart and you can have an election in 6 weeks. Uh, what are we really looking at here in terms of the mood of the continent, and what's this winter going to look like, especially now that the pipelines have been turned off, especially now that economic decoupling from Russia is far beyond what it has been in decades in Europe. How is the winter going to affect the major European players, and how is that going to influence their populace? And what shift in attitude is that going to have towards Ukraine? And like I said, I think a lot of this will take a while to play out. I don't want to assign a time frame to this because I think that's just getting too lost in the weeds. As with my previous prediction, I don't want to really assign a time frame. But the question is, as you guys had said before, as this really starts to affect the bottom line of people living in Europe, uh, what is the future going to hold for this? What is the European support for Ukraine going to look like?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
America had to destroy Europe in order to keep its dominance, right? In order to have like an entire region completely supine to it. So, and their leaders went willingly along. A lot of it is because the populations have been propagandized. Like if things had gone along the way that they had been going, like Russia had no intentions to like capture Crimea or like intervene in Syria, even though a lot of advisors to Putin said you're making a big mistake going into Syria. You cannot trust these people. These people are incredibly deceptive. They will go back on their word, and and he's a man who has a history of poor agreements. Minsk one, Minsk two, the
Yeah.
Oksana agreement in Syria that was held in Kazakhstan, where he gave too much,
He
and
was a participant in the Iran deal.
yeah, and so yeah, that one is not so bad, but
No, I agree,
yeah,
but point being, in terms of agreements that
yeah,
just fall apart through no fault of
yeah.
his own because the other parties pull out, that's yet another example where he's very conciliatory, and he gets rewarded with egg on his face.
Yeah, yeah. It is circumstances that have forced him to be more right wing, like honestly, and a certain base in Russia that wants him to do that. Like,
And he's an
Russian
avowed
nationalists, you mean?
Germanophile, where
what's
he
that?
go ahead,
Russian
Jim.
nationalists, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, but as
Like,
for Putin, he was, and I think still is, an avowed Germanophile who had very good relations with the Germans and who wanted to pursue that. And I mean, you look at Russia 20 years ago, you look at opinion on the street, opinion towards the Europeans, particularly the Germans, are very warm and friendly. Russians were speaking German as another language they would learn. But
yeah,
now those feelings have soured. I don't want to say they entirely have transferred to China, but once again, feeling towards China are much warmer than they were 20 years ago, and that relationship was squandered courtesy of the Atlanticists that control Europe, because their masters in Washington, laundered through their masters in Brussels, did not want a situation in which the continental Europeans in particular, and the Russians were on good economic terms, let alone good diplomatic terms, and that had to be curtailed at every step of the way because the only way Europe was going to be able to assert itself as a power. I mean, there's the very practical geopolitical problem of another power block, but there's also the cultural and civilizational question of the old world reasserting itself, especially if the old world can stand arm in arm together and put aside a lot of the previous conflicts of the past several centuries, where you do have that Paris, Berlin, Moscow axis that would have been unheard of
yeah,
at any other point in history. That is a threat to the New World, to the Atlanticists, on a variety of levels, as I said, on the practical level, on the geopolitical level, on the cultural level, and especially on the civilizational level. If these countries that were supposed to be the has-beens, committed to the dustbin of history, can link arms and forge a path for the future, what does that say about the end of history? What does that say about Anglo liberalism? What does that say about any of this? It
Right.
spells very bad news.
Yeah.
Right. All good points. And and of course the thing that I think Brexit had a lot to do, like Brexit in many ways was a preparation for this period that we're in right now. I know I got this wrong.
Well, a subversion of it, anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, I was elated when it happened. I thought Britain would like, well, the opposite of what has happened would have occurred, and instead, what happened was, Boris Johnson literally outdid the labor in bringing in
Ah,
migrants and immigrants.
I'm
Like
glad they
he
replaced all
literally
those Poles
outdid
with
them.
Indians.
But my guess is one of the reasons why they did that is they wanted to weaken the EU. One, because as long as Germany was getting gas directly and no one else could profit from transit fees, uh, this empowerment of Germany for Britain historically for through the centuries has just been unacceptable, and it's also by extension unacceptable for America, and that's why I think there was a Brexit, and I think, I mean, all of us, I can, well, I should just say for myself, I got it completely wrong. And I think that's really the context we should be looking at it now in 2025.
Yes,
oh, you
and
mean the Brexit failure?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they ever really had intentions on doing what like the average Brit on the street wanted. That was
Yeah.
never in the cards, right?
No, it
Remember
wasn't
all that
palliative.
talk?
It was a steam. It was to
Remember
blow off
global
steam.
Britain? Remember Boris Johnson? Global Britain, global Britain. You know his. He has to sort of obey the British oligarchs in the city of London. And
Yeah.
which means like if Europe has to suffer, even if Britain has to suffer, they cannot let this trend of German dominance, economic dominance, because it has no other dominance. It doesn't have cultural dominance. It doesn't have military dominance, but even just the economic dominance was unbearable for them. And I suppose they extrapolated where things would be in 20 years and said, okay, that's it. We're going to do this, and we're going to cut Russia off from Europe permanently.
look at
It
Boris
it
Johnson
suits Britain
himself.
and America more than anybody else.
Absolutely. Look at Boris Johnson himself. His own heritage is global Britain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's what, British, Turkish, Circassian, Jewish. I think even a little bit of Russian, ironically, in there.
yeah,
But to return to your point about the European Union, I think that was exactly it. That first and foremost, the model had to be continued through. That they had to weaken Britain. They had to weaken the EU as a potential rival bloc, and then they also had to punish the British for leaving the European system, where showing any other nation that would not be tolerated, and this is going to be a result that happens to your nation. And it also puts it once again further in that Anglo-American sphere, where it more or less becomes a direct American client state, maybe as opposed to an indirect American client state that we see in a lot of these countries in Europe. And to return to your point about Germany's energy cooperation with the Russians, if we're talking about Nord Stream, skipping the transit fees, piping it directly into Germany, that makes Germany the energy hub of Europe, which
yep,
would have deprived the
Hmm.
Turks of that title. And at the time, American and Turkish relations were much better than they are now.
yeah. Absolutely. The other thing we probably should touch upon, because I think it's obvious now, um, and it has to do with the return. I guess the dissolvement of the post World War II order is has already happened. I know a lot of people think like Russia going into Ukraine is a, a good illustration of this. I don't.
Hmm.
I only think they were forced into doing it. I don't think they wanted to do this. That's why I think they were always so unprepared for this current war and Maidan and everything thereafter. um, Putin is a very hesitant guy, and he just looks at economic stability. It's probably from, he was a cab driver in the 90s in St. Petersburg and all that. So
Well, I
he
thought he
is.
was a mastermind KGB agent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just a lawyer, like
Gotta watch
in
out for
Germany.
those pencil pushers.
Imagine like you're in the height of the Cold War, you're a lawyer in East Germany, and then you're like driving a cab in St. Petersburg. Like, so I think, the economic devastation, but I guess what I'm getting at is, I remember in 2022 or 2023, it was in the spring, and we were talking about, like, tacit support for Ukraine from Israel and from Jews, right? With knowledge of, and I brought up, I shared some screen caps back then, of Russia 1 or Russia Din, and they, so this is like this is very mainstream in Russia, and they're being interviewed, and I forget who, one of the people who was being interviewed. He's fairly well known, and basically what him and the interviewer come to the conclusion is Jews are just not managing their narrative anymore. And I think now in 2024 and after 2023, we speculated on the show as well that the whole the Holocaust narrative is being shed. They know it can't be used anymore.
Well, as demographics change as well, like slavery, colonialism is more what motivates recent
Right, but
immigrants. Yeah.
there's just not that many Holocaust survivors. I know the numbers keep going up, but and all the Israeli newspapers, they'll always tell you that they found more of them. But the truth is, I mean, that makes no sense. The amount of Holocaust survivors is just going down and down, and Israel's ambition to expand its territory knows that it has to come at the expense of the Holocaust narrative. And I found out recently, last week, that Dugin actually said this as well, that the Jews have given up on the Holocaust narrative. The Holocaust narrative is over, and I think that's largely true. And I say this to also say that, I know we've already discussed Trump with Greenland and Canada, but there is now this feeling that we can return to pre-World War II era where we can, take over territories. I mean, America is in Syria forever, and in Iraq and Saudi Arabia. They haven't de facto created another, but they have. In a sense, they have. So, um, eh, so anyways, I thought that was like another interesting development in 2024. But I think the best example of this is actually not Russia, but Israel.
Hmm. You mean Israel, like as a ethno state, like propelling itself against the sort of post-war
Right. Expanding its
end of history
territory,
narrative that it's
disobeying
so
the
benefited
Westphalia
from?
Agreement. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's like they can talk about the Holocaust all they want, but I think even for many of their, fellow tribe members, they understand it's over, and I think for most of the world, they understand it's over. Like for them to, if they're going to assert themselves more muscularly, if that's such a word, then it would mean that they would have to give up part of the victim narrative, and I think they're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I think they know that its shelf life has come and gone. That it just cannot be perpetuated forever, and that in a way sets up a kind of, a kind of opportunity. But it's also why, Zionist control and Jewish interests in the West are more entrenched than ever. In a way, like their expansion into Syria and Gaza and Lebanon is also how they're doing it on political and diplomatic means, and even economic means via banking, in the West, right? If they're going to let go of this, then they have to consolidate their power in these areas because its shelf life is, it's coming
Well,
to an
there's a
end.
sense, like in Israel, like with Likud, that is the only opportunity they're really going to get for like massive expansion and to get rid of solve their, Gazan situation. So I mean, how is the war going anyways? Are they still bombing places or
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We
So
can.
like yeah, what
Constantine, did we put up that picture already of better times in Syria?
Oh no, I don't think we have.
Yeah,
Hold
I
on.
mean, I think we're going to be talking about Syria. Syria, tangentially is related to Israel, but these are better times. This was a real era, maybe even a golden era.
That's like the Eric Straker Palestinian flag right
Yeah,
there.
I know.
Okay, because
Yeah.
because of some certain things, I think I can only keep this on screen for so long before
Yes, yes,
our,
yes,
our
yes, I
overlords get
forgot, I
too
forgot.
angry at us.
I
So
love, I love the jihadi dad with the head. He's all sad.
so you guys you
Don't.
guys can go back and look at that on your own time if you want to. But for the sake of keeping the program up, I'm only gonna give you a little glimpse of it.
Yeah, I'm just a civilian with my bakery shop. But yeah, so I mean, they're asserting themselves. I mean, there have been some very interesting developments. So some people have said that when Turkey and HTS have asked the Russians to stay in Syria, that they don't mean it, because what they really want is them to leave. Okay, and eventually they will. My guess is Erdogan is going to look to the Russians as a counterweight to the Americans and the Israelis over the question of the Kurds.
He's always done that.
Yeah. And the question is, like, again, Putin has made some very bad deals, but I would like to think that after the Russo-Ukrainian war started almost 3 years ago now,
Mm.
that you think he's learned, even if he hasn't learned the lessons, there are people around him that cannot tolerate him making any more bad decisions. It's just not tolerable. I think he is cognizant of that, right?
Yeah, people in the Kremlin, they don't want to suffer another 2022 or
Yeah,
sorry, 2023. Yeah.
because what would Russia gain, right? What would Russia gain out of helping Turkey?
Nothing.
What? Nothing. Nothing. It would gain nothing.
Fuck.
So why would they, like, what does Turkey have to offer them? And it doesn't really have that much to punish them with. Yes, I know, the Dardanelles and so on and so on. It's true. That's a part of it. Um, but I think a lot of Russians wonder why are they there in the Middle East to begin with? And as I said, especially in Syria. Now, the other news coming out of Syria is today, America lifted sanctions on energy development. So the buying and the selling of oil. Of course, when the Americans took over the oil and gas fields, they made sure about somewhere between 30 to 40% of the oil went to Israel. And kind of like what they did in Iraq, right? Um, so I mean, when Trump says we should have taken the oil, I mean, you did. You're just sending it to, like, your friends in Israel. So, whatever.
Yeah, the whole narrative of like the Iraq war being for oil was bullshit to begin with. I mean, let's be real. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. There's
you
there's other
yeah.
reasons.
You guys mentioned GDF, and I know GDF is like a fucking bread tuber, and I hate those people. But he did have a good video about the real reasons for the Iraq war
Yeah,
and like the
he
geopolitical
is good.
situation. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
is good. I hate him for the commie stuff. I do
Yeah.
subscribe to some commie channels that have good analysis, but
Yeah.
when they say stuff like comrade or like, I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
I'm sorry, but you have to have at least your accent before I accept you saying comrade in any context.
Well, yeah, and he doesn't touch Russia because he knows his fans are like leftoids. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
and
yeah.
other
He's
bread
very.
tubers, all the other bread tubers. I mean, here's the thing. I know, because maybe just because I'm paranoid, maybe I shouldn't admit this in public, but like I know a little bit about the Nicene conflicts among the political left when it comes to geopolitics, because I have, like, over the years observed, like, monitored a number of Antifa accounts, and for some odd reason, a lot of them are pro-Ukraine
Yep.
and and some at least nominally pro-Israel, except for like
Yep.
when they couldn't hide it because of October 7th, because the vast majority of younger leftoids are anti-Israel, right? Not
Yep.
knocking them for it, but like a lot of the Antifa accounts, they're very suspiciously
Yep.
tolerant of Israel.
Yep.
So GDF, I think the reason he kayfabes probably his true opinion on Dugin and Russia is because he realizes his audience, they've been conned into this like Nophoid narrative. When back in the day, back in the 2000s and the 2010s even, you had more of like the exile, great gray zone, and like before she went totally fucking crazy because of Trump, you had like what's her
Oh,
name?
the Young Turks.
Yeah, well, the young Turks, but like you have what's her name? Johnson?
Johnston, Caitlin Johnston, I
Caitlin
think. Yeah.
Johnston, or
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
like Amy Goodman before like Trump broke her brain. You had a coalition of like anti-globalization leftism that was like, I wouldn't say like, I mean, of course, the conspiracy by a lot of Antifa accounts is that they're like being bought and paid for by Russia. And like there's some like weirdo, yeah. I mean, there are some like weirdo communists that are probably getting money from the Kremlin, but like as a whole, like a lot of these people, they try to accuse like Matt Taibbi and Max Blumenthal of being
Oh
Russia
God.
shills or
Oh
whatever.
yeah.
It's bullshit, right? So a lot of the like far left, they've consolidated their opinion against Russia. Whereas if this was 2014 or 2004, as opposed to 2024, then you would have more of a contrarian opinion when it comes to distrusting Israel and America when it comes to their proclivities in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. But nowadays, a lot of these people like GDF, they probably have to kayfabe their real opinions because the international left has been bought into this anti-Russia. They're funding global fascism. All of the right-wing anons that you hate, even though half of them hate Russia as well for different reasons, that they're all being funded by the Kremlin. Peter Thiel's funded by the Kremlin, blah, blah, blah.
Oh my! Really? They actually believe
They
Peter
believe that
Thiel's?
they believe that every right winger, Bronze Age pervert's being funded by the Kremlin.
Oh
I'm
God.
being funded by the Kremlin, according to this one. Anyways, never mind. I don't know what happened to my Antifa stalker. But anyways, yeah, we're all
Wow.
being funded by the Kremlin. Duke, I mean, that's, you have to make, well, I mean,
Everybody
that's,
is a Duganist except me.
yeah, everyone's a Duganist. Yeah, Michael Millerman's being funded by the Kremlin.
Mm,
Like everybody's like the Kremlin has so much money to throw around the dissident right. But
they're
then when
so
the tenant
wealthy.
media, yeah, then the tenant media thing came out, it's like, you know, they are pushing money towards like grifters and coalers like Tim Pool. But then like, yeah, excuse me. But then you have like the reality that half the dissident right in America and in Canada hate Russia. The other half, they're like kind of nominally don't care. And then you have like the few people that actually kind of are pro-Russian. So the ideological picture is much different. But when it comes to political left, it's much easier because the vast majority of the political left hates Russia and
Yeah.
they hate Israel. But the people that are making decisions in terms of the ideological output, such as these Antifa groups that are, let's face it, being funded by the federal government or by NGOs, they have the suspiciously tolerant opinion of Israel.
Yep.
Whereas they don't have a tolerant opinion the way they would have in the 2000s towards Russia and China and so
All
the
I can
ideological
think of
picture is very different.
is that demonstration in Germany where they have the Antifa stands with Israel flag.
Well,
Yeah, I
according
remember that.
according to a lot of these European leftoids that are pro-Russian, I'm sorry, pro-Ukrainian, they have this like conspiracy theory that the AfD is being funded by Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, every like anything nominally right wing is basically being funded by Russia according to these people. And like there's this one, I'm not going to name names, but like there's this like one YouTuber that always goes after Dr. Pravani, AA, always goes after Morgoth. It's like all the British right, they're being funded by Russia. All of the AFD funded by Russia. It's like everyone's funded by Russia. So like,
Holy
so
shit, Russia is so wealthy.
Well,
yeah,
isn't
like
Putin the
they,
richest man in the world? Isn't he
Oh
sitting on
yeah.
the ancient vaults that give him like $200 billion?
You know who's also being funded by Russia?
Who's
Musk.
who
Remember that was another one.
who?
Musk.
Oh yeah, Elon Musk is being funded by Russia. Yeah, like that's
Yeah.
he's allowing Russian disinformation according to British politicians in Applebaum. And same with Zuckerberg now. Zuckerberg is allowing Russian disinformation, which is another story of 2024. Is that you know these tech bros are trying to like kiss up to Trump, and but Trump's also being funded by Russia. Oh, I mean, Trump was put in there by Russia.
Oh yeah, they
So
hacked the voting
Oh yeah,
machines
yeah. I
because
completely forgot about that.
yeah, the
democracy
Russian
dies in
server
darkness.
farms. Yeah, the
Yeah,
server
yeah.
farms. But so I think like the ideological picture of the political left is much different in that they are pro corporation, they're pro globalization, and they have a very odd. There's a great follower of mine who's a great meme maker. He's a great poster. I should follow him back. You know the poster Wotan Prince?
I haven't been on Twitter in
It rings a
ages.
bell.
Yeah, like I don't endorse everything he posts. I don't endorse like all the spinny wheels edits or whatever. Okay, I'm just saying this publicly. I don't endorse. But he had this great point. He said modern leftism is essentially ethno-nationalism for everybody except for you and at your expense.
Yeah.
And so the political left they're all essentially ethno-nationalists. It's the same way with like pro-Ukrainian people that will take on leftist talking points. Pro-Chinese people in Canada will take on leftist talking points about the indigenous people. Now you have the pro-Muslim thing with Rotherham, the inquiries coming out of the UK. They have these leftist talking points about the evil racists and all that. But yet they don't really have the same flavor of transnational progressivism, the way that like their largely white leftoid counterparts do in North America and in Europe. They have a completely different framework, but they're willing to use you as a pawn because frankly you're a fucking idiot if you're like one of these anti-fascist leftists in the UK that say that there's no such thing as the grooming gangs and that's all racism. And actually, don't you know that there's a bunch of like white nonsense as well? You're a tool, basically. Like, you are a spiritual slave. But no, so they have a very paranoid, schizoid view of why the political right believes what it believes. And then you have to like keep in mind that they believe this on the political left, when a good portion, I hate to say it, of the political right as well, they're also being conned by various narratives that like Elon Musk is their guy and like Elon Musk is going to deliver them freedom and like so it's all
I mean,
like it's
Elon
a
Musk
Russian
bans
doll.
all these accounts that were like legal immigration for America is just as bad.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's actually worse when you think about the quote unquote high skill ones, right? Because
Right.
they're subverting American jobs that actually do matter.
I know
And in
these guys are
Canada.
going to work for far less, right?
Yeah.
All these white guys that went to school, that paid
That are
their
living in vans
high.
in California and in Vancouver. Yeah.
Right. They're not going to get the job.
Yeah.
Right. And you see a lot of uppity Indians posting on Twitter about how we're going to conquer you. All the CEOs are Indian.
Yeah.
Like
We're
it's
going to
just
replace you. It's just that white
it's
women
so
never.
cringe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's very bad.
Yeah. They had to do it during Christmas as well. That was another thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he immediately changes direction.
Yeah.
And
sorry, I mean Western Church, Chris. I'm very sorry. Western Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Musk goes all in on free Tommy Robinstein. Like, give me a break, man. Like he had like.
Oh my god.
Well, no,
like
that's very
Robinstein
consistent.
has like two different Jewish groups that are like funding his court cases and everything. And today the parliament voted in Britain to strike down an investigation into grooming gangs.
Whoa!
By 3 to 1. like
Yeah.
3-1, and it's like
Well,
111 versus 300 something.
Look, I'll just say that
Very depressing.
the
did
pro-Indian
you know that
position.
Tommy Robinson? There's court documents where. Sorry, Constantine. Really quickly. There's court documents where Tommy Robinson admitted that after he left the BNP, that he was going to essentially give the feds and
Yeah, I
MI6
know about that.
information. Yeah, so there you go.
Well,
and of course,
I-
the Israel Iran connection is there too. But
Back in the day, I knew some British nationalists who completely educated me on that stuff.
Me too. Yeah, I knew a few.
Between like 2010 and 2014.
Well, I'm
About
glad you
the
guys brought that up
BNP
because that's more important than what I was going to
Yeah,
say.
go ahead, Constantine. Go
But
ahead.
what I'm going to say is the pro-Indian position and the pro-Tommy Robinson position are very much the same. As we know, there's plenty of legal Indian immigrants who are part of the EDL.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That are also part of the AFD as well.
It's
no,
the whole thing
no,
is so
I hate it.
it's so
I hate it.
farcical. It's so farcical. The whole
Speaking
thing.
of Persian and Indian lesbians.
Oh no! Oh no! Go on.
Well, the chick that runs the AFD. Like, listen, not that I'm not bashing the AFD. I think the AFD is the only hope that the Germans have. But they still are. They're not like as based in trad as people think. Obviously,
Yeah,
they're,
yeah.
yeah. The leader is a lesbian that's dating a Sri Lankan woman.
Right, and they have an adopted child. Oh no, it's her child.
I think they do have,
don't...
something like, because most lesbians, they actually have had relations with men. But
Imagine my shock.
A lot of lesbians actually do have biological children. Did you know this?
Yes, yeah.
It would get into too much information about my personal life, but I know more about the topic than I care to. Like I said, it gets into some family stuff. I'm not going to diverge to the public. But on that note, I guess I'm forced to support Sarah Wagenknecht. She's at least not a lesbian. Am I correct in my assessment? Then I reluctantly have to support the what's her party's name?
What if a lesbian couple said they wanted to have a kid, and they see how intelligent as a sensitive young man that you are, Constantine, and they're like, you know what? Like, we don't want to go through the rigmarole of sperm banks and IDF and where am I going with this? Don't disregard what I just said. Don't worry about it.
I'm kind of thinking like for the AFD to gain power, to finally convince the elites that they're not Nazis.
Yeah.
Right. She's going to have to convince her son. It's a sacrifice that they'll have to make to become a trans girl.
That's gonna.
I have a Sri Lankan wife. I'm not a Nazi. Look, my son is a trans girl.
But the thing is, to my knowledge of National Socialism, these values are all in alignment with one another. Gorky talks about this.
Yeah.
There was this trans Nazi on Twitter that had these whole threads about.
Which one? Oh my god.
That had these like schizo threads about like based in trad homosexuality and like the ancients had trans people and like when I don't know, like it's kind of, but yet well, let's not delve into it, but I don't know why do lesbians like fascinate men so much? Why is that like the thing? I know why, obviously.
Yes, but I can tell you, and once again, I don't want to divulge too much because it does involve some family stuff. After a certain time of proximity, it just turns to disgust, just like absolute contempt and disgust. But I will leave it at that.
That was like, speaking of like 2024 in review. Remember Mark Robinson, how he was on that porn site in the 2000s?
Oh no!
And he said like he liked to watch trans porn, but like it's like a trans woman having sex with a biological woman. He said that was ultra masculine because like you get rid of the man, but like there's still fucking involved. Like he literally like.
Well, it's not an end of the year. It's not an end of the year show with Gio until we start talking about trans porn. Oh dear.
No, but think of it this way. Like, not that I'm like, it's obviously bonkers, but if you're like a porn addict, you could like easily slip into this opinion that like, oh, that's the best of both worlds because like there's no man involved, but there's still fucking. It's like, like
Oh God.
deranged people out there.
deranged shit. Yeah. No, apparently this is. I was talking with a friend online about this, and apparently, like, Pornhub has those statistics. Apparently, like, that's there was like the Psychology Today article about it, how like that's gaining popularity, where like trans people are having sex with biological women. And I think like there's something like in the sort of Coomer mind, there is like a cross wiring of like how that would be appealing, because it's like you're insecure about your own masculinity, but at the same time you don't want to be like a total, So, anyways, let's move on.
Well, on that same topic, I'm pretty sure some AFD candidate actually just got outed for his Twitter post involving let's just say a woman who sells herself on a certain infamous website. Yes, so
Yeah.
I suppose that actually is all just par for the course, and that does loop back around because this is the world we live in. And look, I mean, some degree of degeneracy is always going to happen, but why do we have to have the dumbest forms of it? Like, why can't it just be like, what just happened to a simple mistress? Okay, what just happened to, just the bog standard scandal?
Did you know that James Lindsay's daughter had an OnlyFans?
What?
James Lindsay's one of those people that I just don't like to think about.
Okay, recently people found James Lindsay's stepdaughter's Twitter account. She had an OnlyFans that I think he forced her to delete. And she also claims that her biological mother, is in a quote unquote open relationship with James Lindsay, but she doesn't go out and cheat on Lindsay. Lindsay's the one that has sex with other women.
That's
women. Okay.
Well, I mean,
that's shocking.
No, but like, isn't that's just a scummy thing? I hate that shit. That's why like people talk about open relationships. It's like, I don't know. Like, let me put my male feminist cap on for a minute. Like, isn't it like kind of like a scummy thing to like, even if you have a stepdaughter, you have kids, it's like you're setting this precedent for her, and obviously if she's got an OnlyFans, then like.
Speaking of OnlyFans, and just to link this to Ukraine, there was a male British mercenary that was captured in the Kursk region by the Russians, and it turns out he also has an OnlyFans.
Oh yeah, they were like taunting him with it.
I'm gonna start throwing things. It's
well, believe it or not, I was actually gonna do this episode with Kat on the computer room. There was always like a strange, weird connection between various factions of the far right and the conservative media and porn stars. Like, there's conservatards that have like, I remember Brandy Love was like a Trump supporter. She'd do like the whole MILF porn thing. But there was also like alt-right porn stars. There was this one in France. Her name was Electra. She was like an alt-right porn star, and she got charged for spraying like graffiti, National Front graffiti. And then there was like other ones. It's like, I remember there was like schizo thread in this like one forum. I forget the forum's name, but it like cataloged all these porn stars that had been involved in far right politics. And there's sort of like, I guess Matt Crumpler would call it a like je ne sens of subversiveness. I don't know. Like, there's.
I would hate to backtrack, especially the James Lindsay, but Gio, I have to scold you because monogamy is woke, right?
Yes, monogamy. Yeah. People were saying this. Yeah, that if you love your wife, to not cheat on her, that's woke, right?
Oh
that's
my
the
God.
Woke, right? Yeah.
And then Twitter is cancer. It's just cancer.
That's why I hang out on Telegram with all the schizos.
Oh my God.
I can't even bear to go back on Twitter, honestly. I mean, I can't anyways because I'm banned.
James Lindsay also said that his lesbian daughter, they like check out chicks together, and it's like a wholesome Chungus thing.
What a messed up family.
I despise these people, and in many senses of the words. Like I said, I don't even like to think about these people.
Yeah, true.
It's and I appreciate you for bringing this up because it is all very interesting. But I'm just saying, regardless, I don't like to think about these people. I don't like to
Mm.
acknowledge their existence. I like to erase that off from my mind. And you know what? This is all still the least surprising information I heard about them. And yeah, I actually have a guy, once again, anonymous source, who has his ear to the ground on a lot of this kind of stuff, who feeds me all the information I need to know, and he does it in a very entertaining way. But once again, everything he tells me confirms all of my biases. It's stunning.
Yeah, man, all
Well,
report
to
source.
radically shift subjects.
Please do.
So we've discussed Russia-Ukraine war, Europe, touched a little bit on Syria and Israel and Iran. I guess the only thing left is any forecasts for China?
China collapse imminent. Okay.
Okay, you're
Yeah, there
gonna
you
go
go.
there. Yeah, China
Um,
will collapse.
Peter Zion, China will collapse in Panama. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
China,
Remember the ghost cities.
China
The ghost
collapsed.
cities.
I'm gonna start my OnlyFans account now.
Oh my God! Yeah,
but
China. Yeah, China economy strong.
but in all seriousness, I think because of America's stretched obligations, a lot of the Taiwanese issue will fall to the. I mean, it already has fallen to the back of the public mind,
Yeah, nobody
and
cares.
I do think that continuing with my current predictions for the Asia Pacific, that there will be a continuation of the economic relations between, of course, China and Taiwan as they're continuing right now. I know that China has done the military exercises, but I still think that there will be a concerted effort on the part of mainland China for a peaceful reconciliation with
Yeah.
Taiwan. And that I
Yeah,
do think that the pro Beijing elements in Taiwan, as American leadership continues to flounder, unless they can find some other guarantor, which I'm not seeing any takers, the pro Beijing position in Taiwan, I'm not going to say is necessarily going to become popular or gain a great amount of popularity, but I think it's going to gain some sympathy. People are going to start to see the other side of the argument in short order.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose, Geo, if you want to go on to that, but I suppose after that we should talk about the fallout, for the ongoing fallout from this Korea situation. If
oh
Geo doesn't
yeah.
have any
Oh yeah,
thoughts on
yeah.
No,
it,
but do you think that Trump would? I mean, he has been conciliatory, but would there be incentive for Trump to do the whole like Obama pivot to Asia bullshit or no?
it really depends on how Ukraine and Iran go. I know that's a
Yeah,
generic answer,
yeah,
but
true.
I think that China is put on the back burner, and that Trump's policy for at least the first year of his administration is going to be play coy with Xi Jinping, and we're great friends, and we get along so great, and he's a respectful guy, and he respects me because we're both strong men. But like I said,
I know how to speak to him.
I don't see many major shifts between particularly U.S.-Chinese relations
No,
in the next year or so, beyond the fact that once again Trump is probably going to have some conciliatory meetings with the smiles and the handshakes.
I talked to Z Ping. He's a great man. I
Yeah,
know what he's like.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
uh,
on some level, I do love all the bullshit. I don't believe any of
yeah,
it, but
yeah.
it is hilarious
Well,
to listen
that's the
to
thing. I could never, as
from
frustrated
time
as
to
I
time.
get, and as much as I might denounce him, I can never hate Trump.
No, exactly. Yeah.
It's so awful, but it's true. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you guys, I agree. I think I see more tariffs. And remember
Mm.
that Biden did not radically in any way depart from what Trump did. In the same way, Trump will probably not radically depart from what Biden did, either with Israel or with Ukraine. There haven't been any, like, I hate to overuse the word, but radical departures.
No, no,
Well,
there
do
So
hasn't.
you?
I would see more tariffs, more assertions. Maybe, like I said, maybe Panama is like a place where they think they can provoke, uh, you know, uh, China. I don't know.
Well, do you think that I was gonna say like, do you think that there would be like a overt funding or Westoid media promotion effort towards various like subversive factions in China? Like, will the Chinese like spurg out and go after the Uyghurs again? Or like then they'll become like this, big expose where they'll get like, who's that fucking guy, that journalist in Washington that does the exposés? He wrote that book Veil. He was the one that broke the
I'm not
Nixon
sure.
story. Bob
Bob
something.
Woodard.
What did you say,
I think
Constantine?
it's Bob Woodard or Bob Woodward or
Bob
something.
Woodward, yeah. They'll get like Bob Woodward to be like, I have a contact in China, and they're like genociding the Uyghurs. Like, well, I mean, not to say that they're treating the Uyghurs good, but
China on brink of collapse. You heard it first.
yeah. Like, who's that guy on YouTube that like constantly? I think he works for Forbes. He like always talks about how corrupt and dangerous China. Well, I mean, China is corrupt and dangerous. I'm not pro-Chinese, but like, who's that one guy?
They all blend together at a certain point, but I know who you're talking
Yeah, he's a
about.
Forbes guy. Yeah. God, what's his name? He's Chinese himself. He's not Peter Zion, another guy.
It like I said, it escapes me at the moment.
Yeah.
If any of our fine audience members know, feel free to comment or put in the chat.
I keep saying Peter Zion, like Zion, not Zion.
I mean, I frankly don't care how his name is pronounced. I'll just put that out there.
No, but I think China more or less. I mean, unless there's a black swan event where they'll like push some new funny business, which I hope they don't, in terms of like another clown vid.
Oh no, avian flu.
Yeah, avian flu or something like that.
Oh, scarier
we've
this
known
time.
about it for 100 years, but it's super scary. No, unless they do something like that, I don't think really they're unless like Trump monumentally fucks up again and like appoints another Fauci, then
Well, I'll just put it this way: I don't think they can do something like that. Not only China, but really anyone. I don't think
no one will have any stomach for it anymore.
No. I mean, I remember when China tried to bring back the lockdowns in November 2022. Nobody even had the gall to call it a CIA protest because that's how universally reviled lockdowns were at that point.
Yeah. No, they're probably not going to do that. If there is like another health scare, like I personally think, when it comes to the glowies who are against Trump, I think like it doesn't really make sense for them to do it, because it's not like Trump is seeking re-election the way that Clownvid fucked over Trump in 2020. So I think that terrorism will definitely be on the table. Some kind of black swan event with China would kind of be on the table the next 4 years. But you never know what's going to happen. I mean, we live in a world where, because of the internet, 1 week of news is equivalent to like a month or a year of news in, previous decades. So, I mean, I wouldn't think that there's going to be much of disturbance in China, but you never know. I mean, yeah. Trump
the only thing that would draw China is a situation in Iran that is critical.
Yeah. And
if even China then, don't bet on China. Don't bet on China.
No, I mean,
these people are so risk adverse. This is why, okay, you can call it 5D chess or whatever, but I just think a lot of it isn't 5D chess. A lot of it is, I mean, who can argue? They've been around 4,000 years. Okay, like, but a lot of it is just, being risk adverse has helped them.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, Iran is a bigger deal. They have a lot of investment there. They have to appreciate that if they lost Iran, what that could mean for them in terms of like gas and oil. Like it's not. I mean, yes, I know that there would be like a half a dozen countries that immediately would say, "We'll give it to you." I get it. But like I said, there's probably more Chinese investment in Iran right now in the last year or two than any other area.
And also, not only that, but the Belt and Road Initiative, Iran is right on that.
Yeah.
And if they want these land-based trade routes, stability in Eurasia is of the utmost necessity.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, I suppose they could that being the American Empire, try to increase operations in Central Asia. And to return back to one of the points we were that we actually discussed a bit earlier in the show, when it comes to a lot of these people who go off in jihad in Syria, where
Hmm.
a large part of why that happens is because these Central Asian countries, and I don't necessarily blame them, their governments encourage the emigration of these people, so it's no longer their
Yeah.
problem. Go to Turkey, go to Syria, even go to Russia for all we care, just get out of our country. And if we do see, especially with some of the migrant crackdowns in Russia, and some of these people, especially after the war in Syria had been quote unquote won, return to Central Asia, there is potential for a great deal of instability there, especially in the smaller nations like Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan,
Yeah,
where
battle-hardened jihadis coming back from battle. Yeah.
yeah, and then Afghanistan, although the Taliban won the war, I know that they're having their current feud with the Pakistanis right now. It's as liable to fall into chaos as it ever is. So you could see Central Asia once again, especially if there are forces that would like to fan the flames, become a very contentious zone, and that also would
Yeah.
distract Russia from the Ukraine issue. I'm not saying that would happen. I do think that the Russians, especially post 2022, have a bit more of a security infrastructure, especially speaking with China, speaking with Kazakhstan, in order to clamp down on those kind of movements, snuff them out before they really take root, to nip them in the bud, if you will. But like I said, the potential is always there.
Well, I think if the old guard in Afghanistan were to pass away, because a lot of these guys are old. Like Hekmatar is like, he's been there since the '80s, right? Trained by the CIA. So if a lot of those guys, if they manage to slip away, you might have like an end of the Soviet Union situation where there's a public funeral every month, and the younger people, they don't know what the fuck to do. And so Afghanistan is always, their borders are even to this day porous, and the
And
Taliban guard has to fight off various ISIS factions and so forth. Yeah.
And once again, who are we kidding? We know that the Taliban has no power outside of Kabul, as with any other
Yeah.
Afghan central government. It is up to the tribes,
Exactly.
and whoever they throw their loyalty behind is who rules
Yeah.
Afghanistan. A very feudal society in the quite
Yeah.
literal sense of the word.
Yeah, and if they decide the central authority in Kabul doesn't serve their interest the way they decided with Hamid Karzai, then it's over. And the Americans aren't going to come and save them either. So like, what's going to happen? Like the Russians are going to go in there again? Like,
I don't know,
come
maybe
on,
China can
man.
take their turn, but once again, we're talking about a very risk-adverse country and civilization,
Yeah,
so that
yeah. Can you imagine the Chinese soldiers in Afghanistan? It's like, well, every other empire in history had their turn. Might as well. Like,
they should just recruit the Mongols to go in there again.
or the Greeks.
I don't know, like the president of Mongolia, that big stocky guy who gave Baron Trump the horse. He just needs to get him, and I don't know, a few thousand horsemen. If there's any trouble in Afghanistan, just pay them
Yeah.
off to go fight China's war in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing that would scare China would be various security obligations to the pipeline. So I think like that would be. I don't think China would be in the position of sending troops to Afghanistan.
Absolutely not. No.
They'll probably
Wagner
pay
is
some
more likely to show
mercenaries,
up in
but
Afghanistan.
yeah, I mean, they'll probably pay some foreign mercenaries to help out the Afghanis, but like that's pretty much it. I mean, if those tribesmen in Waziristan and Pashtun and elsewhere, if they don't want to play ball even with the Chinese, there's not much the Chinese can do. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but
Um,
I think the question of Afghanistan, like it's going to continue to be status quo no matter who's in power. Once again, it's
yeah.
just the who
Yeah.
can win the loyalty of the tribes. But the one last thing I wanted to discuss was South Korea,
Oh boy.
and that
The
is
Femcell War.
not quite that, but just well, I suppose it does kind of relate back with the way South Korea politics is structured. But in terms of the attempted coup and then the impeachment of the president that was later undone, then his security force protected him. I know that this has created a row in South Korean society to the point where uh, what's going to result from this? What are we looking at going forward? I know that once again, South Korea doesn't necessarily have a stable political history, and that we are talking about a country that has jailed former presidents before and has exiled people. It's nothing out of the
Yeah.
ordinary for that. But is the is the country going to continue on the relatively stable path it's been in the last 30 years? Say
No.
demographic questions aside, whatever. But the point being is, are the Americans going to be able to make their foothold in the Korean Peninsula? I think is the big question. I think we all want to get to the bottom to.
It depends if they export enough Korean communist, anti-capitalist films that, ironically enough, are for popular consumption. Like they just have to like produce more. What's that film called? Squid Game. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, or like Parasite. You know what's funny about Parasite is that like the narrative was like totally subverted by the authorial intention, the media literacy is totally subverted by the aesthetic truth of that film, because the people in the basement, they were like literal spiteful mutants. Like it's, so Korea just has to like import more like K-pop and like Hollywood slop, and the Americans will have an incentive because do you know like a lot of black people learn Korean now in America because of
Really?
K-pop? Yeah. Like a lot of black women, they're like starting to learn Korean now because of
I mean,
K-pop.
that sounds like there's been a lot of healing since the LA riots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
With the whole rooftop
The
Koreans
rooftop Koreans. Yeah.
and wow.
Oh man, it was like the Korean shop owner in Fallen Down. That was pretty funny. It's very funny. Like defense didn't realize like inflation is a thing, but whatever.
Yeah,
No,
but
Korea.
Korean soft power.
Yeah, exactly. No, Korea. Like I think they seem to be stable now, but unfortunately, like the demographic situation is pretty dire, and the sort of like gender war that's going on. The fact that like Korea has been run by like a matriarchal cult for like multiple decades now, that's another thing. Like Korea's got a very fucked up political situation, even though they have this like weird Potemkin village version of American capitalism and liberalism.
Now, I don't want to divulge too much once again because I don't know how much you want to say about it, but my ear to the ground in Korea says that while it's not like outright false, a lot of the stuff you hear is misconstrued, especially like about a lot of the gender stuff. Not that it doesn't exist, but that especially when it comes to foreign audiences, it is something that they pick up on for just because it's very sensational. But once again, especially when it comes to the demographic question, and I'm a skeptic on the demographic question. I'll just say this outright now that we're this late in the show, where I think that a lot of these countries, especially these industrialized countries, can weather a few generations of demographic decline, and that they might have to do some economic restructuring. It might not be the most comfortable process, but
like Japan.
Yes, like I think Japan is actually a pretty good example of that. But once again, when you're faced with that versus, say, infinite H-1Bs, I think the options sort of start to sort themselves out. But yeah, I mean, Korea, yes, objectively they do have the lowest birth rate in the world, and a lot of that is because of economic structure, to my understanding, because of the way that their economy works with their workforce.
It's
like partly their culture as well.
Their culture, it's like total shock doctrine. Capitalism meets their culture. That's a big problem.
I mean, the Asians have not been known for very big families to begin with.
Yeah, that's true.
And
well, except for like Filipinos, but like they're like they're basically South Americans. They're spiritually South Americans, Filipinos. There's quite a few of them here in Niagara.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my mother worked with a lot of them for a long time. Yeah, they're just South Americans, really.
I remember going to a Filipino wedding.
Oh yeah.
And I saw for the first time their love of karaoke. It was like unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I've never seen a culture that loved karaoke so much. It's like you're a very unique people, I must say.
You can't. I think Matt Forney, he got rid of all of his PUA books, so you can no longer buy. I think there's PDFs, but like you can no longer buy a copy of Bang the Philippines. So.
Oh God.
I'm not bashing him. I'm actually friends with Matt Forney, but I think that was a pretty noble thing of him, Yeah.
But No,
in the
I didn't
Philippines.
know about the Filipino karaoke lore. That is news to me. And as a fan of karaoke myself, I can get behind that.
Well, that's how a lot of the prostitution is facilitated in the Philippines because
Yeah,
of the
really.
karaoke
That
bars. Yeah.
I thought it was just the U.S. Navy presence.
Oh, that too. That too. Yeah. Yeah. But like, it's very similar to Thailand and Vietnam, where you have like these veteran passport bros who are like boomers that like they actually like live in Thailand or a lot of them. Some of these guys were like Vietnam war vets.
Well, yeah, the tied this back to Afghanistan. This is how the Rambo 3 started.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, They're brave soldiers, the Mujahideen. That's so fucked up. Then, like, right after 20 years of GWAT, um, but yeah, there was this whole documentary about. I believe my friend Catherine actually she was making a documentary about passport bros in Thailand and the Philippines, but I think like the funding didn't come through or some shit like that. Um,
Bizarre part of the world.
yeah, very bizarre.
I personally would never go. I know some
Yeah,
people
me neither.
who, once again, woman, not a man, who I know in real life, who wants to go to this part of the world for tourist reasons. I
Huh.
tell her, no, I've never outright told her, but I think every time she says it, are you insane? Why do you
No,
want to
there's
go
women
there?
that no, there's women that do sex tourism there
What?
too. Like,
But I
yeah.
can tell you from personal experience, she's at least I don't think would be the type to do something like that.
Okay, yeah,
So, but she's very much into the weird esoteric, like Eastern spirituality stuff. It's like,
Oh
oh
God. Okay.
oh
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, it's like, come on. Like I don't like to cause like too petty of conflicts with people I know in my real life, so I don't say this. But once again, it's one of those things that come up. Like, I think that in general,
Pray to God she doesn't go to India.
oh, I would outright tell her not to if she told me she was going to.
Yeah,
Just like once again, that's the one case I would actually intervene. But I think that unless you have a very like obscure interest in regional history, I think anyone wanting to go to Southeast Asia is bizarre. Now I know there's
yeah,
cases like some parts of the world, and I know it's been increasingly popular with Russians. That is like their tropical destination. Fair enough. Go to the resorts, stay on the resorts. I understand, but anyone going for any other reason besides that or a very obscure interest in a very particular history, why would you go to that part of the world?
there was this manosphere guy. I remember my friend Fentanyl Blowdart. He was telling me there was this manosphere guy that was pretty popular. His name was like Fitness something or Fit something, not Fresh and Fit, but like he would like frequent Southeast Asia, and I believe the Taiwanese mafia killed him. Like they did a hit out on him.
I'm
And
sorry,
like
I don't mean to laugh, but that's just such a bizarre story. I don't know how this, but
there's like these whole like group of manosphere guys who are like more underground, where they call it they believe that like no man could like ever derive pleasure from like a real relationship, so they call it whore maxing, where they'll like spend money to go to Southeast Asia, and they call it androcentric sex, where it's like all about like men being serviced, right? And this one guy, he actually like ran a brothel in Thailand, or was it the Philippines?
what's the
His
difference?
his name was Sharky, and he like legitimately disappeared, and like nobody's heard about him in like 5 years, and like nobody's found him. And he like actually ran a brothel in like one of these places, and he was like one of these manosphere guys that believed that like if you're like a man, like Western women are fucked, and like you should just go to Southeast Asia and like pay for it, and which I don't endorse. I think that's fucking stupid.
No,
But
I
like, yeah,
very.
It's
I mean,
gross.
yes,
it's
I agree,
gross.
but
Yeah, it's gross.
interesting
Yeah.
nonetheless that you do have like once again. I mean, just one. I'll say for the third or fourth time, you're a very bizarre part of the world, but I can't help but be
Yeah.
slightly fascinated, even just in a morbid sense.
Yeah. Um. South Korea, excluding karaoke bars and brothels. Um. I. You know. I saw a poll that said that by a slim margin, most Koreans want this guy, their president, impeached.
Oh yeah.
I mean, more than impeached, they want him locked up. And it's amazing how quiet the Americans are about it. Like, I personally don't believe that they didn't know what he was trying to do, and a lot of it had to do with like weapons to Ukraine, and this crazy plot to make it look like communists had infiltrated South Korea. They were gonna, not hijack him, well, hijack something, vehicle that he was in, and really crazy stuff. But do you guys want to turn the conversation before we end the show to the crazy terrorist attacks and LA burning?
Oh yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
because they booed Hulk Hogan at the first Netflix WrestleMania. No, I'm kidding. That's a stupid joke. I'm kidding. But
So that
no,
was
but there is a lot
quite
of crazy
tragic.
communists in South Korea, though. There's like a lot of these like femcel communists. I'm serious. And you see them on Twitter once in a while.
Wow.
They're like gender communists.
Gender communists. Wow.
Yeah, some of them, some of them are like acceleration. Some of them are like red. Do you remember Nick's Land? G-Ax, gender acceleration. Do you remember this?
I have some cursory knowledge.
Yeah. Like some of there's like quite a bit of South Korean like xenofeminists or accelerationists who are a questionable gender, to say the least. So
God, these
so
people
much
are
lore
mutants.
I know about like innocuous shit. My brain's been totally fried.
It's like which way Korean man, gender accelerationism or glorious battle on the Kursk front.
Or in seldom, yeah.
You could go to Ukraine and fight North Koreans, but you'd rather stay home and get involved with gender accelerationism. You're pathetic.
Well, some of them, they could go to the front line too. The Reddit battalions.
Yeah.
Well, at that point, why not just join the Kursk front? Just hop over to CMC. I'm reporting for duty, Chairman Gimmon.
We play we will play K-pop 24/7.
Well, both sides love anime, so there's not,
Well, I think that's becoming a global thing at this point. I think it's just like transcended boundaries. I mean, I personally can't see the appeal, but okay, there's worse things in the world. But man, I
like some anime.
Yeah. This conversation has gotten very derailed, but not necessarily in the worst way.
You ever watch K-On?
I'm familiar. I know what it is, but no, on principle, I just simply will not.
Susume is probably like one of the best. It's solely on endorsed. It's like these girls, they like hike, like hiking's their thing. These like cute girls that go mountaineering. Yeah, it's great. It's like very, very Faustian. It's very. It's true.
I see. No, but seriously.
Yeah, Susume. That's what it's called.
That's great. Yeah. So, anyways, the terrorist attacks.
Oh yes, that's what.
Yeah.
Before we got to
initially the one in New Orleans had, I believe, a more of an impact. But as the days went on, the attack in at the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, I think it's the more compelling, mysterious attack.
Well, you got a bizarre
because so many things don't make sense.
Ukraine tard.
Yeah, another bizarre Ukraine tard. Both of them went to Fort Bragg. Both of them served in Afghanistan in 2009, but we don't know if they were even in the same unit or in the same locale when they were in
the
Afghanistan.
Tesla one?
Yeah, the Tesla guy, Livensberger or Livenberger or whatever his name is.
He was the Ukraine stan?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he was trying to. His idea. He sounds.
A carbon copy of Ryan Ruth.
Yeah, he sounds kind of crazy. Like, you know, he went on about these drones, and the China is the the Chinese have these drones. Forget. He didn't say this. Forget. Iranian mothership, but remember that Iranian mothership.
He
Oh my God.
believes that Elon Musk is like funded by Russia, probably.
I don't know. I know his girlfriend or wife was Democrat and posted Democrat stuff. I don't know if that means anything. Now,
Mm.
he's one idea that I heard that kind of makes sense is when he was reaching out to this guy that was on that podcast, Sean something.
Oh, fuck! What's his name?
Yeah, the podcast that I'm
Yeah.
talking about. He had Eric Prince on, and like, anyways, so he reached out to this guy and said that he turned the truck into a V bed, which is, I guess, is some kind of a bomb, like, is on it. And he's going to Mexico. They're after him. The feds are listening in. But if he's using a phone, it's like, well, I mean, you're doing everything to get tracked. And maybe one of the theories I heard that made sense was he's doing it because he does want to get caught. But then even more bizarre is this idea that the Las Vegas police said that he killed himself with a 50 caliber pistol. These are the
Whoa!
these are the kind of pistols that will blow your entire head off.
Yeah, Desert Eagle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Desert Eagle, right? Like it would like obliterate a watermelon. That's what your head would be like. So today they're trying to convince people that he put this gun in his mouth. And Colonel Daniel Davis has become obsessed with this. And he is, and he had Larry Johnson on. And they're
Yeah.
they're going 38 minutes, and he's obsessed with I like the man. I like both of them.
Yeah.
They're nice guys. And he freezes the frame, and you can see that this guy, a gun like that with not a very long barrel, like, is going to create a light source
Oh
for
yeah.
the camera to pick up. But the light source that you see is not because he has a pistol in his mouth, and of course you can't see that he does have that. And um, the bomb blows up not in the back of the truck, but in the front of the truck, directly in front of him. And so now the investigators are saying they found the pistol between his legs. Like, I don't know. There's something about this that is so fishy, so bizarre. Like, if
Desert Eagle would blow
yeah,
half across the room. Yeah.
I know the bullet will literally exit the truck, even if it's a Tesla truck. Like, and it shows you like how much it contained the blast, because he had something like 70 pounds of some kind of explosive on board. He had airline like jet fuel as well to light the whole thing. Why would you need to blow your head off if like the explosion will kill you?
Yeah.
Like, that makes no sense. That's very bizarre. And of course, the other guy who became a jihadi overnight. I mean, not overnight. I bet there was some kind of a radicalization that was taking place.
Yeah.
And Fort Bragg, where they both went, does have a history of this. If I recall, back when Obama was president, one of these guys uh, went into a officer's tent and just started throwing grenades in there. He actually killed 8 military men.
Oh, what
Uh,
was that guy's name? I know what you're talking about.
you know who I'm talking about, right?
Hassan.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You're
Yeah,
right.
all
You're
those
right.
neocons, they love that story. Yeah.
Right, right, right. So, I mean, obviously, this is going to justify like America's never going to leave Syria, so America will always need crazy stuff like this. But the other guy is so schizo. He's so weird. Like, he says he's going to Mexico, but he doesn't go to Mexico. He goes to another Trump Tower in Las Vegas. And he's going to go to Mexico to evade them. The other thing is of course, one of the early investigators that was on air was surprised, like, at the bomb that he had created, because both these guys were
Hassan
veterans.
K. Akbar, by the way.
Yeah, very good. Thank you,
Yeah.
Constantine. This guy was a 19-year veteran, Green Beret, decorated 2 tours in Afghanistan. Like, Green Berets have to know how to make their own explosives. And, maybe the truck is very strong, but anyways, there's just lots of holes in this. It's very weird.
He wanted to
I
beat
don't
the
know.
libtard McVeigh.
I mean, he didn't have enough to do something like that.
Yeah, the Murrah building. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, he didn't even have like U.S. agents putting bombs in the basement to do that. So, I mean, if you
Yeah.
think of Van just did this to whatever, but yeah. So, anyways, I find that very weird. I guess it'll just disappear as a story, but it is compelling because it's so strange and because of his beliefs. China could wipe us out. We have this technology to, what do you call it? Gravidian, or I almost wanted to say Dravidian because this podcast has a lot of Indian references, but 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 he was going on about that help for
Branch
Ukraine.
Davidians?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something. Anyways, it's basically it's anti-gravity stuff. Okay, like top secret. And again, it's like China mongering, support for Ukraine. For all I know, he was sincere about that stuff. I mean, there are crazy people who can be very sincere about those things. The guy who tried to kill Trump at the golf course in August.
Ruth.
I mean, yeah, yes,
National
he was.
Endowment for Democracy.
Yeah, yeah,
It's very
and
funny how like modern, like all the neuroses of like current day, like transnational progressive liberalism, like how it just mind fucks these people. Like it totally rots their brain, where
yep.
like reality is exactly what the government tells you, and therefore I have to go and kill the chuds because of it. Like,
He's absolutely nuts. And there's a photo of is it Ruth or Roth?
Ruth, yeah.
Ruth. There's a photo of him with this guy. I forget his name, but he got Biden was handing out the Freedom Awards, this medal. Like, he gave one to Hillary Clinton, and he gave one that Ruth is in a picture with in Kiev. So
Yeah.
Both of these guys are kind of this obsolete agents, so to speak, that are useful. They're mostly useful because they are nuts, right? And they are there to act as a kind of a magician, so to speak, to convince and create a crowd around them. And but they are kind of crazy. So anyways, I thought that was kind of interesting, some of the strange parallels that we've seen. There's not much I think the State Department or America can do with this guy. I mean, honestly, he's more of an embarrassment than anything else, and maybe that's why the the pistol, putting the pistol in his mouth story is so fallacious, is because he is a kind of embarrassment, right? He's going after Trump. I mean, why would he want to blow himself in front of a Trump tower? If he supposed, I'm not saying he supported Trump. Okay, obviously he didn't. Although Colonel Daniel Davis seems to think he did, but his wife certainly didn't. But the other one, they might make some hay out of it because, of course, there was the attack in Germany.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the
both
libtard
killed.
that wanted to let in atheist women from Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
It sounds good. Why can't we have traditional jihadists again?
Yeah, I mean,
Whatever.
They were all recalled to Syria.
yeah. They're out of commission because they have more important things to do, like Syria.
Speaking of Syria, they've started executing some of Assad's family.
but his
Oh
his
yeah.
brother, Maher, he's still. I don't know where he is now, but I did read
Is he still in
reports that
Iraq?
he's.
I think was his last known
No, I
location.
thought he's somewhere in Latakia. He's still fighting with a few men. He still has this cell. But the tragic thing is, you see, like obviously now they've the jihadis that the Americans helped support for so long. Um, they destroyed a cross on one of the mountains and mocked Christ, and of course they also they're not I mean, they have targeted Christians, yes, but they really are going after the Alawites,
Oh
who
yeah.
they
Well,
consider even worse than Christians because they consider Jews and Christians as people of the book, but their theology is wrong. But for them, the Alawites are anathema. They can't even be considered
They're
part of
like
the
pagan
book.
infidels. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's sick. I mean, I've seen. Oh man, there's a beheading, and it's just grotesque what they've allowed to happen. And everybody knew this would happen. And the Western media is trying to cover it up. They have like influencers in Damascus and Aleppo going around. Of course, they're not going to film any of this stuff, right? And they're going to try to tell you that it's all exaggerated or it didn't happen, fake news, Russian propaganda. Um,
well, the recent news I saw
it
out of Syria in terms of especially news about the Christians is that HTS and Jelani's quote unquote transitional government are coming down hard on the Antiochian Patriarch right now, and they want him to resign as a quote unquote agent of the Assad regime and as part of the
oh
remnants
my
regime.
god,
Fuck.
And there was actually he gave an entire address actually on New Year's Day addressing that, saying that he's not going to resign, he's not going to give in the demands of HTS,
yes, that's right. I read that. Yep, yep, yep.
and I know at this point, like Jelani, like tried to play coy. It's like, oh, I might make I can't remember which bishop. It was one of the Orthodox bishops. He said, oh, I might make him mayor of Aleppo if you guys play along. But I mean, now it's that turned out to be fake, by the way. But
Yeah.
now there's this, and it's probably the least surprising outcome that could have happened. And I think this will continue. But as you were saying with the Alawites, it's just open season, just open slaughter. Whereas the
They're literally hunting and killing them. They're literally beheading them in the street. That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
And of course, Annalena Baerbock, the stooge that she is, went to visit them with what's his name, Michel, the diplomat from or the foreign minister
yeah,
from
Michelle.
France.
Yeah, Michelle.
Um, and of course, she's dressed like this stupid German boomer woman, right? She's wearing high heels, like
Ugh.
tight jeans, right? And she's nodding her head way too much, and it's very stiff and abrupt. Um, because the Jelani and his entourage won't shake hands with her because she's a woman.
Yeah.
And then they published the photos of her at the meeting. I mean, everyone else is a man except her, and she's blurred out.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer woman.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing she won't stoop to.
What what do you even say?
What? Yeah, I know. What do you even
It's
say?
it's disgusting. And like I'm
So
not
much to
I'm
answer
not even
for.
trying to like stand on like some like high and mighty 20th century liberal principles, but HTS disgusting organization. The fact that this
It's
once
literally Al Qaeda. It's
yeah
Al Qaeda. Like
this one stable
they
country was
they
delivered
literally decided to work with Al Qaeda.
into the hands of Al Qaeda, uh, completely
Bro,
Yeah.
I, I
destroyed.
for, bro, I forgive you. You know what? I discovered I hate Assad more.
Ah.
Look, those
Do
towers are
they do
bad, but have you
they
heard
go out of
about
their
barrel
way to
bombs?
attack Israel? No, 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 no. Don't say
Yeah,
anything. Yeah.
no, they never will. And so, of course, they've been asking repeatedly, including the UN, for Israel to stop and they're not going to stop the bombing. And then, for Israel to remove itself from the southern Syria, they're not going to do that. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Hopefully, we'll see what happens this
Yeah.
year. Like I say, a year is equivalent to a decade in terms of happenings.
Yeah,
So we'll see what happens, and
I'm
it's
sure
already
we'll
starting off to a crazy start. So
I'm sure we'll have
really.
plenty to cover by next week, and I'm sure Gio, you will be back sooner rather than later, and I look
oh
forward to
yeah,
that day. And once
Me
again, I want to
too.
thank you for coming on once again in order to do these long haul episodes because I know we get we get into the thick of it with these kind of things. A lot of stuff to
oh
cover.
yeah.
This was kind of your interview, kind of current events, just the way things shook out with how everything was. But once again, uh, your presence is always appreciated, nonetheless. Do you have any upcoming projects or anything that you would like to shill right now? I'll just say preemptively, give this man your money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I don't know when this episode's maybe coming out tomorrow, but um, on Thursday, what is it? Thursday the 10th, is the National Futurist launch party for the art gallery Rachel Haywire is putting on, and there's going to be manifesto readings. One of the readers is Orc Brand, and there's going to be
Oh, great.
music and a dinner, and also uh, me and Alexander Adams, our artwork is also going to be auctioned off and sold at this event. Now, keep in mind my physical artwork isn't going to be there. I didn't have enough time, but I will definitely ship out various paintings for anyone who buys. So I don't know what I think Alex Adams, some of his paintings will be auctioned off. My one big painting I did a few months ago will be auctioned off. So if you're in New York City, go to the event bit for the Cultural Futurist, and or go to Rachel Haywire's Twitter where you'll find all the links, or her Substack, the Cultural Futurist, and it will link to the event bit, so you can go there, enjoy some manifesto readings. And I will also be reading. I'm not reading, but like I'll be giving like a little talk through Zoom because I didn't have time to drive to New York City. Um, I'll be giving a little talk on Zoom about the Italian futurists. So yeah,
That's
really
great.
good. Yeah. So yeah.
Well,
Other than that, content minded this week will be about various artwork topics from uh from I'm going to be reviewing the paintings of Dr. Ray Peat, and he was actually a pretty good painter. And I'm going to be reviewing some other things, some Twitter aesthetic posters, and I think people wanted me to talk about, but there's nothing really much to talk about. Do you know that fucking guy? He's like he's like a tech guy, but he's like a podcast bro. Bet David, what's his name?
Patrick Bet David.
Patrick Bet David.
Oh, yes, I
He
know.
he
You Iranian
commissioned,
guy?
yeah, the Iranian guy, yeah. He commissioned this painting. It's like a podcast bro, like Sigma grind set kitsch, where it's
Oh my
like
God.
a bunch of these people like Lincoln, Ayrton Senna, Tupac, Thomas Jefferson, I think. They're all in this like
Oh,
pod
I've seen it.
library. Yeah, where they're like debating the Communist Manifesto and the Fountainhead. And I'm like, what does Tupac have to say about the Communist Manifesto? I think like Elon Musk is in it, or like Young has to be in it. There's like I don't know, that's so fucking ridiculous. And then it's like he's describing the painting. It's like it's like literal like Daily Wire, like Joe Rogan artwork. Like,
I think it's
I love
beautiful.
it. Yeah, it's me. The same guy that does it, he had this other painting that Matthew the Stout was like really picking apart. And the funny thing is, the guy's actually a good painter, but it was like Jung and Nietzsche next to this like Dark Skulls demon, and like
Well,
it's like what? It's like Jordan Peterson artwork, you know.
oh my God.
I think the painting did have Jordan Peterson in it, but like Jordan Peterson had this like long, slender, demonic hand sort of deal. Like
Uh,
I don't know, man. It's like
wow. Unbelievably
Tracer
big.
or Shadow, bro. It's like I guess it's like, the penis he didn't wash, the demon he didn't slay. You know. Anyways, yeah. So that'll be a content mine, and also I think I'm going to review the monumental art critic, the art criticism piece in Harper's Magazine by Dean Kissick. So that came out at the beginning of the year, or right before the beginning of the year, and it's really, I think it's a good piece. It would never have been published during the 2010s because he goes into like a lot of like woke contemporary art. It's a really good piece, though. It's a really great piece. I like it. So Dean Kissick's generally a good art critic. One of the last few good art critics, besides Alexander Adams, myself, Brad Tromel, and who else? There's a few other good art critics, but like most art criticism's trash, like fucking, Jerry Saltz, trash. Woke tardation. So yeah, man. But yeah, so that's coming up, and all my other usual stuff. DA will be on Friday because Prude had a family thing, and me and him were both away during the holidays, so we couldn't do Digital Archipelago. I'm sure we have a lot of stuff to talk about, but like, everything's changing. We didn't even cover the Rotherham thing, but I guess everyone else has been covering it, so it's getting late.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on it when we were talking about,
Yeah.
Musk trying to make hay out of it. Like I said, they voted against it. Terrible disappointment, terrible betrayal too.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, like Brexit, like everything else that's been coming out of the UK, just a terrible betrayal. And yeah, Jess Phillips, for example, I mean, just a hideous demonic woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah.
Well, thank you once again, Gio, for showing up. Give this man your money. I will say that much again. And thank you, everyone else, for tuning into this episode. Once again, I hope Merry Christmas to both calendars, and I hope everyone had a good New Year as well. And I know that you guys are still lagging behind on New Year's, so don't worry. We'll wish you a happy New Year in no time.
New Year's is next week for us.
Yes, we will be back certainly, and we'll have plenty of ground to cover. And thank you for sticking out another year. We're coming up on 7 years of the program, believe it or not. And you know what?
Unbelievable.
It's been a nice little corner. I know we're a small operation, especially for 7 years long, but I like it this way. Okay, that's just look. We have a pretty strong autism filter.
Still talking about Syria.
we are still. It's been 7 years. We're still talking about Syria, and we will continue to talk about Syria until the end of days. I can guarantee you that. But with that being said, I know that we have a pretty strong autism filter, so I appreciate all of you who can get past that. I know it's a little bit of a difficult task sometime. And
James Lindsay's daughter's OnlyFans groiper.
Is so true.
I gotta tweet that.
Where else but the War Report can you get biting Syria analysis along with all the James Lindsay lore? Nowhere else. But thank you once again, everyone, for tuning in, and have a nice week.
God bless. Goodbye.
God bless.
Sweet.